Hey everyone, and welcome to Nighttime Stories. I'm here to help you drift off into a peaceful sleep. Let me know where you're watching from. I always love seeing how far these stories reach. Now, get comfortable and relax. It was one of those late nights where the city feels like it is already asleep, even though you know there are still people awake somewhere, tucked into neon diners or stumbling home from bars. I had stayed later than planned at a coworker's apartment, and by the time I said goodbye, the streets were nearly empty. I remember how quiet it was when I walked to the bus stop, the kind of quiet that makes every sound stand out more than it should. My footsteps echoed too loudly. The buzz of the street lamp overhead felt almost electric against my ears, and when the bus finally lumbered up the hill and stopped in front of me, the hiss of its brakes made me jump. I climbed on, dropped my fare, and noticed right away how empty it was. Normally at least a few people ride that line, but not that night. Just the driver, sitting stiff in his seat, and one other person, a man. He was already there when I got on, sitting toward the back. Something about him stuck in my head immediately, though I could not have said why. He had taken a seat in the very back row, which I always thought was strange when a bus is nearly empty. Most people spread out, grab a middle row seat, or sit near the front where they can get off faster. But he was right there in the back, hands folded on his knees, posture too straight. I made the mistake of sliding into a seat just a few rows ahead of him. I do not know why I did not sit closer to the front with the driver. Maybe I just did not want to look like I was scared, or maybe I thought nothing of it until it was too late. I sat down, set my bag next to me, and tried to ignore the way the bus groaned as it pulled back onto the road. For the first few minutes, I did not pay much attention. I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur into long yellow streaks as we passed closed shops and sleeping houses. That was when I heard it, a voice, faint, low, just a few syllables strung together. At first, I thought it was the driver muttering to himself, but the sound was too close, too near my ear. I froze, tilted my head just slightly, and realized it was coming from behind me. The man was whispering. I did not turn around right away. Something in me said not to. It was not a normal kind of whisper, not the sort people make when they are talking on the phone or humming a song. It had a rhythm to it, like someone reciting a prayer under their breath, words tumbling one after another too quickly for me to catch. The hair on my arms prickled, and I pressed myself back into my seat, trying to focus on the passing streetlights outside. The voice stopped suddenly, as if he knew I had noticed. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he was just talking to himself or practicing something, but the silence that followed felt heavier than the whisper had. I could hear the hum of the bus lights, the occasional rattle when we hit a bump, and beneath it, the sense that he was still there, watching me. I kept glancing at the reflection in the dark bus window, hoping to catch even a faint outline of him, but the glare from the overhead lights blurred everything into smudges of gray and yellow. We passed 3 stops. No one got on. The streets outside looked emptier each time we slowed to a crawl at the corner. I remember thinking that I should just move up, sit near the driver, but something in me resisted. I did not want to make it obvious that he had gotten under my skin. Then, out of nowhere, I felt a shift in the air behind me, that subtle sense you get when someone leans closer, when their presence presses in on you even if they do not touch you. His voice came again, not muttering this time, clearer, direct. "Do not get off yet." I jerked in my seat, my throat tightening. My first instinct was to turn around, but I stopped myself halfway. The way he said it, slow, deliberate, like it was not advice but a command, it rooted me in place. "Do not get off yet. They are waiting." Every muscle in my body tensed. I wanted to demand who he meant, what he was talking about, but my tongue felt heavy in my mouth. The bus rattled along as if nothing was wrong, the driver oblivious up front. I gripped the edge of the seat in front of me so tightly my knuckles ached. Finally, I forced myself to turn around. The row was empty. No one was there. The back of the bus stretched into shadow, seats unoccupied, floor littered only with scraps of paper and a crushed soda can. My chest tightened. I whipped my head back toward the driver, half ready to shout, but when I glanced out the window instead, the reflection in the glass caught me. A figure was sitting behind me, clear as day, hunched just close enough that his face should have been level with my shoulder. But when I whipped my head back again, the seat was empty. My pulse hammered in my ears. I told myself I was tired, imagining things, that it was a trick of the reflection, nothing more. But the sound of his voice clung to me, curling around each word like smoke. Do not get off yet. They are waiting. That was when the bus slowed to my stop. The driver flicked on the overhead light, the ding of the signal chiming, and I reached down to grab my bag, my hands trembling. My seat felt like it was burning beneath me. Like if I stayed 1 second longer, I would hear his breath against my ear again. I stood on shaky legs, glanced down the aisle one more time, and told myself that whatever I thought I had heard, whatever I thought I had seen, I was going to step off that bus and leave it behind me. But as I moved toward the front, I could have sworn I felt the faintest brush of fingers against the back of my jacket. The second I stepped off that bus, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But it was not the kind of relief that lasts. It was thin, like stepping from one bad dream into another. The bus doors hissed shut behind me, and I stood there on the sidewalk, staring as the bus pulled away down the empty street. The driver did not look at me, did not even glance in the mirror. For a moment I wanted to flag him down, to say something, but my throat would not work. I just stood there, my bag heavy on my shoulder, the sound of the engine fading until it was gone. The street was too quiet. I live in a neighborhood where there is usually at least some noise at that hour. A car passing, someone walking their dog, the faint thump of music from a block over. That night it was dead silent. I walked quickly, my shoes slapping against the pavement louder than they should have. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see the figure from the bus following me. Every time I looked, the street was empty, but I could not shake the sense that someone was close. By the time I reached my apartment building, my nerves were frayed. I fumbled with the keys at the door, my hands trembling like I had just run a marathon. When I finally made it inside, I leaned against the door and pressed my forehead to the cool wood, breathing hard. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was late, I was tired, and maybe I had imagined the whisper. Maybe there had not been anyone behind me at all. That was the story I repeated as I climbed the stairs and locked myself inside my place. Sleep did not come easily. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every creak of the building making my heart skip. I left the lamp on, something I had not done since I was a kid, afraid of the dark. Every time I started to drift off, I thought I heard a faint sound, the scrape of fabric, the shift of weight against the floorboards. Once, I swore I heard whispering again, just outside my bedroom door. I sat up so fast I nearly got dizzy, but the apartment was silent. When morning finally came, I felt wrung out, like I had not rested at all. Sunlight spilled weakly through the blinds, and I sat on the edge of the bed trying to convince myself to move on with my day. Work would be a distraction. Normalcy would ground me again. That was what I needed. Something ordinary to push away the strange. At the office, things felt fine at first. The noise of keyboards clacking, coworkers chatting about weekend plans, the faint smell of burnt coffee drifting from the break room. It was grounding, familiar. But around mid-morning, one of my coworkers stopped by my desk, looking puzzled. "Who was that guy you were talking to when I walked by earlier?" she asked. I blinked at her, confused. "What guy?" She frowned. "Tall guy, pale. You were kind of leaned over, like you were listening to him. I thought maybe he was new here." The blood drained from my face. I had been sitting alone all morning, headphones in, music low enough that I could still work. There had been no one standing behind me. At least, not that I had seen. I forced a laugh and waved her off, saying she must have imagined it. but inside my stomach turned to ice. That night, I checked my bag when I got home. I do not know why, just a sudden compulsion. Maybe I thought I had dropped something, or maybe I just wanted to be sure it was still only my stuff in there. At the bottom of the bag was a folded piece of paper. My hands shook as I opened it. The paper was blank, completely empty, just a sheet of white torn roughly from a notebook. I sat there staring at it, heart pounding. It should have been nothing, just a piece of paper, but I had not put it there. I was certain of that. Later, around 2 a.m, I woke with my mouth dry and padded to the kitchen for water. I did not bother turning on the lights, just let the glow from the street lamps spill through the window. Halfway across the room I froze. The reflection in the window showed me standing there, but I was not alone. Behind me, just over my shoulder, a tall figure loomed. Pale face, dark eyes, head tilted slightly like he was watching me too closely. I spun so fast I nearly fell. The kitchen was empty. I dropped the glass I had been holding. It shattered against the tile, water spreading across the floor in a thin sheet. My breath came shallow and quick. My heart pounded in my ears. I grabbed the counter to steady myself and forced myself to look back at the window. Only my reflection stared back, alone this time. I cleaned up the mess with shaking hands, then sat in the living room with every light on until dawn. I could not convince myself to sleep. The next day, I told myself again that I was imagining things, that stress and lack of sleep were messing with me. That was until I checked the footage from the bus. The buses on my route had cameras inside, and a friend of mine who worked with the transit system sometimes helped me get copies when I needed them for class projects. I asked him casually if he could pull the feed from that night. He gave me a weird look, but agreed. When I watched it, my blood ran cold. There I was, sitting near the middle of the bus, bag at my side. The driver up front, hands steady on the wheel. The rest of the bus was empty, completely empty. No one sat behind me. No one whispered. No one leaned forward to speak. It was just me. And yet, when I leaned slightly in the video, turning my head as though someone had spoken to me, I saw it, a flicker, a blur of something pale in the seat behind me, just for a frame, maybe less. Too fast to be certain, too quick to capture, but enough to freeze my chest with dread. That night, as I sat on my couch replaying the footage over and over, I heard it again. That same low whisper, curling out from nowhere. Do not get off yet. I leapt to my feet, spun in circles around the apartment, every light blazing, my skin cold with sweat. Nothing was there, but the words hung in the air, heavy and certain, as if whoever had spoken them was still right there with me. By the third night, I had already started to dread the quiet. I used to love silence, especially after a long day at work. But now, it felt like silence was just a stage waiting for something else to step onto it. I kept every light on, my TV playing old sitcom reruns at low volume, and yet I still caught myself pausing in the middle of the room, straining to hear the faintest whisper, a breath, anything that might hint he was still around. Sleep became harder to catch. My body felt heavy, like it craved it, but my mind would not shut down. I would close my eyes and immediately feel the weight of someone leaning over me. It was not sound exactly, not even touch, more like the pressure of being observed. I would snap my eyes open and stare at the ceiling, too afraid to even look at the corners of my room. I told myself that if it was all in my head, then I could prove it wrong. Evidence cuts through paranoia, right? That is what I thought. So the next morning I went out and bought a cheap camera. Not some high-tech setup, just something that could record in the dark and save to a memory card. I placed it in my bedroom, pointed toward my bed, and tried to sleep that night with the comfort of knowing I would have proof one way or the other. When I reviewed the footage the next day, I almost wished I had not. At first it was boring, me tossing and turning, blankets tangled, nothing strange. Then, around 2:40 in the morning, the camera glitched for a second. A brief flicker, the screen going gray and streaked, before it cleared again. For a moment, nothing seemed wrong. I was still asleep, curled on my side, face buried in the pillow. But then I saw it. The blanket at the foot of the bed shifted, like something had pulled it slightly. And then, in the dim glow of the streetlight filtering through the blinds, a pale shape emerged at the edge of the frame. It leaned closer, head tilting, until a face came into view. His face, the same one I had seen in the reflection, the same pale features, the dark hollow eyes. He stood so close to the bed that if I had stretched out my hand in my sleep, I would have brushed against him. He bent lower, almost like he was listening to my breathing, then straightened again. For a long time he just stood there, motionless. The recording went on for over 20 minutes like that, him not moving, me unaware. Then, without sound, he leaned down until his mouth was just inches from my ear. The camera picked up nothing, he said, just static. But I swear I could almost feel the whisper as I watched, like an echo in my own memory. When I woke up that morning, I had no memory of anything unusual. I had thought I slept straight through. Seeing the truth on that footage left me sick to my stomach. I deleted the file and yanked the camera from the wall, but the damage was done. Now I knew he was not just in my head. He was in the room. I could not keep it to myself anymore. I called my friend Sarah, someone I had known since college, and asked if she could come over. I tried to explain, stumbling through the details, leaving out enough so that I did not sound completely insane. To her credit, she did not laugh or hang up. She said she would stop by that evening. When she arrived, I almost hugged her in relief. Having another person there made the air feel lighter, less oppressive. I poured us drinks, trying to act casual, but she quickly noticed I was wound tight. "Show me what you saw," she said gently. I told her about the bus, the whisper, the reflection, the footage. I could see the skepticism in her eyes, but she listened. When I mentioned the man's face, her expression changed just slightly. "What did he look like?" she asked. I described him again. Tall, pale, hollow eyes, no real expression except that tilted stare. Her hands tightened around the glass. "I saw someone like that once," she admitted quietly. "Back in high school. On a bus, actually. I thought it was a dream or maybe a trick of the light, but it sounds like the same guy." My skin prickled all over. What were the chances she would say that? We sat in silence for a while, both of us staring at the blank TV screen. That night, she offered to stay over. I said yes immediately. I figured 2 people together would be safer, or at least less terrifying. We set up camp in the living room, blankets and pillows on the couch and floor. I left the lights on, as usual. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, I woke to the sound of whispering. My throat went dry. Slowly, I sat up and looked toward the hallway. Sarah stirred beside me, blinking sleepily. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. She nodded, her face pale. The whispering grew louder, though we still could not make out words. It seemed to seep from the walls themselves, coming from every direction. I grabbed her hand, and we sat frozen as the sound wound its way closer. Then it stopped. I almost let out a sigh of relief, but Sarah's nails dug into my arm. I followed her gaze to the hallway doorway. He was standing there, tall, pale, head tilted, watching us. For a full 10 seconds, neither of us moved. Then I scrambled for my phone, fumbling to turn on the flashlight. The beam cut through the room, lighting up the doorway. Empty. He was gone. Sarah looked at me with wide eyes. "I saw him," she said. "You are not crazy." I saw him too. We did not sleep the rest of the night. We sat there with every light blazing, clutching mugs of coffee like lifelines, jumping at every sound. By dawn, we were both shaking and exhausted. Sarah swore she believed me now, but that was no comfort. If anything, It was worse, because it meant he was real. And he was not just mine. After that night with Sarah, I realized something had changed. Before, I had been able to convince myself that maybe it was all in my head. Stress, lack of sleep, imagination running wild. But the second she admitted she saw him too, that possibility was gone. It was worse to have someone confirm it, because now I could not retreat into denial. Now I knew he was real, and once you know, there is no putting that back. The following days were strange. I kept thinking I would feel safer with company, so I asked Sarah to stay a few more nights. She agreed, though I could tell she was uneasy. Having her around helped, but only to a point. We would be sitting in the living room and both suddenly fall quiet at the same time, sensing the same thing. The whisper that seemed to ride the air like static, the shift of shadows across the walls that did not match the lights in the room. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a warning. The worst part was that he did not only show up at night anymore. Twice, I thought I saw him during the day. Once, walking back from the corner store, I spotted a tall figure reflected in a passing car window. When I spun around, there was nothing behind me but empty pavement. Another time, I glanced at a glass door in my office building, and for half a second, his pale face stared back. I stumbled so hard that my coworker asked if I was drunk. I laughed it off, but my stomach was twisted into knots. Sarah tried to help. She brought over books she had picked up from a used shop about hauntings and entities and things that sounded ridiculous if you said them out loud. We went through them late one night with mugs of tea, the pages smelling like dust and mildew. Every description sounded too close. Shadow man, watcher spirit, attached entity, protector turned parasite. Whatever label the authors gave, it came down to the same sick fact. It was not leaving on its own. That realization started eating at us. We tried everything the book suggested: salt around the doors, candles, incense, even a prayer circle, which Sarah admitted felt cheesy but worth a shot. Nothing worked. In fact, it seemed to get worse. The more we tried, the closer he got. The fourth night, Sarah stayed over. I woke up at exactly 3 in the morning. No sound this time, just a sudden jolt of awareness, like my body knew before my mind caught up. I sat up slowly and realized the air felt heavier than usual, thicker. Sarah was on the couch, breathing unevenly, maybe dreaming. I was about to get up to check on her when I saw him. He was standing in the kitchen doorway, half shadow, half form, his head tilted at that same unnatural angle. This time he was closer than ever, just a few steps from us. My mouth went dry, and I could not even whisper Sarah's name. I sat frozen, heart slamming in my chest, as he lifted one hand and pointed directly at me. The gesture was slow, deliberate. Not a threat, not a wave, just that pointed finger, like I was the only thing in the world he cared about. Then, without a sound, he lowered it and stepped back into the shadows. I finally managed to shake Sarah awake. She saw my face and did not even ask, just grabbed her bag and said she was leaving. I begged her not to, but she said she could not take it anymore. She promised she would call me, but she could not stay in the apartment again. Her leaving broke me. I understood it, but it left me feeling even more exposed. Now it was just me, alone with him. The next day at work, I caught myself staring at the security monitors in the lobby like I had that first night on the bus. The screens were grainy, but I swore I saw him in the background of one. Standing by the elevator, staring straight into the camera. I blinked, and he was gone. Nobody else saw him, or if they did, they said nothing. That night, I decided to check the bus again. Maybe it was stupid, maybe it was exactly what he wanted, but I had to know if going back there would change anything. I told myself it was about facing fear, taking control, but really it was just desperation. I boarded the late-night bus at almost the same time as before. The seats were mostly empty, just a couple of tired commuters staring at their phones. I sat in the middle, gripping the bar so tightly my knuckles hurt, waiting. I kept glancing back, half expecting him to appear right behind me. But nothing happened. The bus rattled along in silence, and for a moment, I thought maybe I had imagined it after all. Then I noticed the reflection in the window. Not my reflection, but his. Sitting in the seat directly behind me, pale face lit faintly by the passing streetlights. He was not visible when I turned my head, but in the glass, he was right there, leaning closer. I could not breathe. I gripped my phone in my lap, pretending to scroll, but my eyes never left the reflection. At one stop, a man boarded and sat a few rows up. I almost cried in relief, thankful for another body in the space. But when I looked back at the reflection, the pale face was still there, watching. I got off at the next stop, almost running down the steps. The driver gave me a weird look but said nothing. When the bus pulled away, I stood shaking on the sidewalk, trying to calm my breathing. That night, when I finally made it home, there was a note slipped under my door. It was just one sentence, written in shaky block letters. "You should have stayed on the bus." The note rattled me worse than anything else so far, maybe because it proved something I had been trying not to accept. He was not just showing up on the bus or in reflections. He could get into my space. He knew where I lived, and the worst part was that he was trying to talk to me. I shoved the note into a drawer, but it did not matter. The words stuck in my head. "You should have stayed on the bus," like he had some plan for me and I had ruined it by stepping off. That week, I barely slept. Every sound jolted me awake. I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, convinced I could hear the faintest breathing in the corner of the room. At work, I caught myself staring at reflections again, half expecting to see him in every glass door or computer screen. Sometimes I did. Once, in the reflection of my darkened monitor after hours, he stood right behind my chair. By the time I spun around, the office was empty. Sarah stopped answering my calls. I could not blame her. She had seen enough to know it was real, and maybe she had enough sense to get away before it got worse. I wanted to do the same, but where was I supposed to go? If he had followed me home from the bus, if he had gotten inside my apartment without a sound, then moving or running would not help. He was attached to me now. I tried small things to feel in control again. Double and triple checking locks, leaving lights on all night, setting up my phone to record while I slept, though I never had the courage to watch the full videos the next day. I would skim through a few minutes, see nothing obvious, and then delete them before I saw something that would make me lose my mind completely. One night, around 3 a.m, I woke to the sound of my bedroom door creaking. I had left it closed tight, but now it was opening slowly, inch by inch. I froze under the blanket, heart hammering, telling myself it was just the air vent or a draft. But then I saw the shadow. It was long, stretched across the carpet, moving even though nothing in the room was shifting. The shape of a man leaning forward. I shut my eyes and whispered out loud, "Please, please leave me alone." When I opened them again, the door was fully open, and the shadow was gone. The next morning I found another note. This one was tucked under my coffee mug in the kitchen, as if he had been watching me long enough to know exactly where I went first thing in the morning. The note was shorter this time. Just one word: soon. I wanted to burn it, but I kept it with the first note, stuffed into the same drawer. I told myself that if I ever needed proof for anyone else, I would have it. Not that I knew who would believe me, or who I could even tell. The police? What would I say? That a man who only exists in reflections was breaking into my apartment to leave me cryptic warnings. They would lock me up faster than they would help me. I started carrying a knife. Nothing huge, just a kitchen knife. I slipped into my jacket pocket whenever I left the apartment. I told myself it was ridiculous, but it made me feel a little better. Of course, deep down I knew it would not matter. If he was what I thought he was, no blade in the world was going to protect me. Then came the worst night yet. I had fallen asleep on the couch, too tired to drag myself to bed. At exactly 2:45, I woke to the sound of whispering. At first I thought it was from the street outside, But the longer I listened, the more I realized it was inside the apartment. Low, steady, like someone speaking to themselves just a few feet away. I reached for my phone, but the screen would not turn on. Dead battery. My knife was still in my pocket, so I wrapped my hand around it and tried to slow my breathing. The whispering moved closer, right behind the couch. I forced myself to turn my head. In the reflection of the dark TV screen across the room, I saw him. Not just a face this time, but his whole shape, tall and wrong, standing inches behind me. He was bent down slightly, like he was leaning to listen. His mouth was moving, though the whisper I heard was not quite in sync with the reflection. I spun around, knife in hand, but the room was empty. The whispering stopped. I could not stay in the apartment after that. I grabbed my keys and bolted into the night, not even bothering with shoes. I drove aimlessly for an hour, windows down, radio blasting, anything to drown out the silence. I finally pulled into a gas station and sat there under the fluorescent lights, trembling. That is when I noticed the new note. It was wedged under my windshield wiper, waiting for me. My stomach dropped as I stepped out to grab it. It said, "Do not run again." No signature, no explanation, just that warning. By the time I got back home, dawn was breaking. I sat in my car outside the building, staring at the windows of my apartment, half expecting to see him watching from inside. But the place looked ordinary, empty, safe. I forced myself upstairs, every step feeling heavier than the last. Inside, the air felt normal, but I knew better. I checked the drawer where I had stuffed the other notes. They were all still there, lined up like a collection. That was when it hit me. He wanted me to keep them. He wanted me to carry them, to read them over and over until they were etched into me. This was not just about haunting me. It was about control, about breaking me down piece by piece until I was too tired to resist. And I was already halfway there. The sixth note was the one that finally broke me. I found it inside my wallet, tucked neatly behind my ID. That detail is what chilled me most. It meant he had touched the one thing I never let out of my sight, the one thing I always carried on me. The words were written in the same uneven handwriting as the others, but this one said, "Last ride." It should not have made sense. Last ride could mean anything, but I knew instantly what he meant. He wanted me back on the bus, the one place this whole nightmare had started. For days I fought it. I tried to live normally, going to work, coming home, ignoring the drawer full of notes. But I could feel the pressure building, like the air in the apartment was heavier, thicker, every time I closed the door behind me. I kept waking at 2 in the morning, that exact same minute every night, to the sound of someone whispering in the hall. I would get up, check every corner, and find nothing, but the whispering would cling to my ears even after silence returned. By the end of the week, I was done. Sleep-deprived, shaking, unable to focus. I knew that if I did not go back, he would not stop. Maybe I was walking into a trap. Maybe that was the point. But I was past caring. So Friday night, I drove to the same bus stop where it all began. I sat there for almost half an hour before the late-night bus pulled up, headlights cutting through the empty street. The driver was not the same as before. An older man, heavy-set, with a tired expression. I paid my fare and stepped on. The bus was empty. I did not go to the back this time. I sat in the middle row, staring straight ahead, refusing to look at the reflection in the windows. The bus rolled through town, past dark storefronts and shuttered diners, and with each stop my pulse quickened. Every squeak of the brakes, every hiss of the doors made me think he would finally step on. And then, without ever seeing him board, I knew he was there. The air changed. Heavy, damp, like the inside of a basement. The hairs on my arms stood up, and I caught the faint smell of stale cologne. Slowly, against every instinct in me, I glanced at the reflection in the window. He was sitting directly behind me. Closer than he had ever been before, his face pale and expressionless. But this time he did not whisper. He did not lean forward. He just sat there, eyes locked on mine in the reflection. I froze, gripping the edge of the seat so hard my knuckles went white. The driver never turned around. The road stretched on, empty, endless. I could not tell where we were anymore. No landmarks, no traffic lights, just black pavement and trees sliding past. Finally, I forced myself to speak. My voice cracked when I asked, "What do you want from me?" The reflection smiled. Not wide, not exaggerated. Just a small curl of the lips. Then he whispered, almost kindly, "You should have listened." The bus jolted hard, and I realized it was pulling into the depot. The lights flickered. When I looked again, the reflection was gone. The seat behind me was empty. I stumbled off the bus, legs weak, head spinning. The driver never said a word, just closed the doors and drove away into the night. That was 2 months ago. I have not seen him since. No new notes, no whispers, no shadows in the corners of my apartment. Sometimes I catch myself thinking maybe it is finally over. Maybe I gave him what he wanted just by riding the bus one last time. But then the doubts creep back in. I will be walking to work and swear I hear footsteps in sync with mine. Or I will glance at a store window and, for half a second, see a pale shape in the reflection. It always vanishes before I can be sure. I do not tell anyone about it anymore. Sarah has moved on, and I cannot blame her. The police would laugh me out of the station, so I keep it all to myself. Here is the truth, though. I still ride the bus sometimes. Not every night, not even every week, but often enough. And each time I do, I sit in the middle row, stare at the window, and wait. Because deep down, I know it was not the last ride. It was just the beginning of something I will never understand. And until he decides otherwise, I am his passenger. This is one of those stories I almost didn't tell. Even now, I feel weird writing it down. Not because I'm afraid of sounding crazy, though, yeah, there's some of that, but mostly because part of me still thinks maybe it was someone else. That I saw what I wanted to see, or didn't want to see, depending on how you look at it. But I know what I saw. I just don't know what it means. It started 2 Saturdays ago, just before 9 in the morning. I remember that because I had slept in for once and was walking down to the corner deli to get a coffee and maybe one of those awful but comforting egg sandwiches they keep in the foil wraps. It was gray out. The kind of overcast that makes everything feel like it's happening a little underwater. Still cool from the night, barely any wind. I had just rounded the corner near the intersection on 37th and noticed someone at the bus stop across the street. Older guy, grayish hair, big shoulders. Worn brown jacket with one side a little longer than the other, like it had been tugged down too many times. It took me a second, but something about the way he shifted his weight triggered this deep, bone-level recognition. The limp. It was subtle, more like a favoring of one side, but I'd seen that walk 1,000 times. My dad used to do that exact same shuffle. He injured his hip doing construction when I was a kid, and never really fixed it. Said it made him look distinguished. Said it gave him a little character. That was his phrase. So I stopped walking. This guy, the one at the bus stop, turned slightly, and I swear to you, I almost called out. Because it wasn't just the limp, it was his face. My dad's face. Not someone who looked like him, not someone in the same age range or body type. I mean the exact face. The same sun-weathered skin. The same way his jaw clenched when he was thinking. Even the thinning spot at the crown of his head, it was like seeing a ghost, except he wasn't glowing or floating or anything. He was just standing there, real, solid, breathing. I stood half hidden behind a parked van for maybe 30 seconds, trying to make sense of it. My heart was pounding, but I didn't move. I didn't even think to pull out my phone. I just stared. Then he turned his head, and our eyes met. And that's when the bottom dropped out of it. His left eye looked fine, brown, sharp, just like I remembered. But the right one, the one that always squinted more than the other when he smiled, it didn't move. It didn't focus. It looked like glass. Like it had been set in, not grown there. The skin around it didn't match either. Too smooth, almost like it had been pulled tight and fitted wrong. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He didn't speak. He just looked at me like I was the one who was out of place, like I should have known this moment was coming. Then the bus pulled up. He boarded without a word, no glance back. I stood there long enough for the second bus to come and go. I didn't even get the coffee. When I finally made it home, I sat on the edge of my bed for almost an hour, trying to figure out what to do. Should I tell someone? A friend? A doctor? Was it even real? Could someone have found a photo of my dad and made a mask? But why? He wasn't famous. He was just a guy, a construction worker from Queens who passed away from a heart issue 5 years ago. Closed casket. I was there. I spoke at the funeral. I didn't sleep well that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing that glassy eye. The way it didn't blink, the way his face didn't quite move right when he turned. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came the next morning. When I opened my apartment door, there was a photograph on the floor. Just one. No envelope, no note. It was a printed photo, like the kind you get from a disposable camera or an old film roll. Matte finish, sharp colors. It was me. Sleeping. I was on my side, in my bed, the covers pulled up to my chest. The angle was from the doorway, like whoever took it was standing just inside my room. You could see the back of my nightstand, the corner of the closet. It was definitely my apartment. But that's not all. In the photo, there was a hand. Just one. In the bottom right corner, out of focus, but visible, reaching slightly toward the edge of the bed. And I swear to you, it was his hand. Same thick fingers, same worn skin, the exact way my dad's knuckles bent when he reached for something. I dropped the photo, backed away from it like it might bite. Then I locked the door, deadbolt and chain. I didn't leave my apartment the rest of the day. I kept the lights on, even though it was bright out. I went through every closet, every cabinet. I checked the windows. I checked under the bed. Nothing. Nothing that said anyone had been there. The place looked exactly like it always did. But I knew something had changed. Someone had been inside, and they wanted me to know they had been close enough to touch me. I didn't sleep much that night either. It was like every time I shut my eyes, I saw that photograph again. Not the whole thing, just fragments, the edges, the hand. My own face, half buried in the pillow, mouth slightly open, completely unaware. It made me feel vulnerable in a way I hadn't felt since I was a kid. Not scared of monsters or anything, just scared of not knowing who might be near you when you're not looking. I kept checking the locks, front door, windows, Even the sliding latch on the bathroom. I don't think I've ever locked the bathroom in my own apartment before, but I did that night, just to be sure. The next morning, I took the photo and put it in a drawer, not to forget about it, but to contain it. Leaving it out made me feel like I was inviting it to happen again. I didn't throw it away, though. I wanted to badly, but something stopped me. Maybe because part of me still needed proof it actually happened, that I didn't just imagine the whole thing, that I didn't fall asleep in front of some creepy movie and dream the rest. Around noon I went outside, not because I wanted to, but because I had to see the bus stop again, just to make sure I hadn't filled in details that weren't there. The sky was clear this time. Everything looked normal. Same graffiti on the side of the bench, same faded schedule in the case. Nothing strange, no one waiting. I stood there for a while, trying to replay the moment in my head, the way he moved, the way he looked at me, and more than anything, that eye. That glassy, unfocused eye that didn't match the rest of his face. If someone was trying to fake being my dad, they did a weird job of it. Like they got almost everything right, except for one big thing. That part still didn't make sense. And then there was the jacket. That brown one he always wore. I hadn't thought about it in years, but standing there at the bus stop, it hit me I still had it, folded up in a plastic bin in the closet. I had kept it after he passed, along with some other clothes and his old tool belt. I hadn't looked at that stuff in forever. When I got home, I pulled the bin out. There it was. Same worn collar, same faint grease stain on the left sleeve from when he spilled something working on his truck. I held it up and checked the pocket. Inside was a movie ticket stub from the week before he died. So the one at the bus stop couldn't have been his, at least not the real one. Still, the feeling didn't go away. That night, I didn't bother trying to sleep right away. I made coffee around 10 and stayed up in the living room with the lights on. I didn't turn on the TV. Just sat there, waiting to hear something. I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe another photo. A knock, something subtle. What happened instead was weirder. At about 1 in the morning, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment. Nothing unusual at first old building, people come and go, but these were slow, deliberate. And they stopped right outside my door. I turned off the lamp and sat perfectly still. No knock. No voice. Just silence. Then the mail slot creaked open. It didn't make a sound for a second, and then I saw something slide through. I waited a full minute before walking over. It wasn't another photo this time. It was a strip of paper, narrow, torn from something larger, and on it, in handwriting I swear I recognized, were 3 words. You forgot me. That's it. No signature, no explanation. Just that sentence, like an accusation, or a warning, or something in between. I stood there holding it, trying to place the handwriting. It wasn't perfect, but it was close to how my dad used to write notes to himself. Scraps on the fridge. Little things like call Joey or check the boiler. But this one didn't look like a reminder. It looked personal. I didn't go back to the couch. I didn't turn the lights back on. I just stood there staring through the peephole for what must have been close to 20 minutes. Nothing. When I finally looked out into the hallway, it was empty. No footsteps, no door clicks, just that humming fluorescent light and the same peeling paint near the stairwell. I didn't sleep that night either. The next morning, I walked the whole building, top to bottom, every hallway, every stairwell. I didn't knock on any doors. I'm not that bold, but I kept checking for anything strange. A door left cracked, a window open that shouldn't be, a neighbor I didn't recognize, but nothing stood out. Until I reached the basement. The laundry room was empty, one light flickering, the machines were off, but on the far wall, near the utility panel, someone had scratched something into the metal. It was faint, barely visible, but it said the same thing. You forgot me. Same phrasing, no punctuation, same feeling. I left immediately. I still don't know what I'm dealing with. Someone pretending to be him, a stranger with some weird agenda, a sick prank from someone who knew us both. And I hate even thinking this something else. Something I don't have words for. But whatever it is, it's not random. It knows who I am. And now, it wants me to remember something I've clearly tried to forget. I kept the strip of paper in my wallet. I don't know why. I didn't want to look at it again, but I couldn't bring myself to throw it away either. It felt like evidence. Not the kind you bring to the cops, I knew how that would go, but the kind you hold on to when something doesn't feel finished. It was the same reason I still had the photo. Same reason I started locking the deadbolt even when I was home in the middle of the day. That whole week I kept waiting for something else. Another message, another noise, another person in the hallway who looked almost familiar, but not quite. But nothing happened. Nothing obvious anyway. Still, I could feel it. Not the kind of fear that rushes in and takes over, more like a slow build-up, like walking around your apartment with a cup of water and realizing every time you pass the hallway you spill a little without noticing. Then one day the floor is soaked, and you don't remember doing anything different. That's what it felt like. One night I came home from work, and my kitchen window was unlocked, just a crack, not wide enough to think someone climbed through, but I never left it open, ever. I always made a point to check every lock before I left the apartment. It had become a ritual even before all of this. I didn't sleep in my bed that night. I stayed on the couch, half watching late-night cable and half just listening. Every creak sounded wrong. Every gust of wind through the hallway vent made me freeze. But nothing came. In the morning, I made myself go through the motions. Shower, eat, check the mail. Except this time, when I checked the hallway, something new was waiting for me. It wasn't another note or photo. It was a book. Hardcover, black spine, no title. It was leaning against my door like someone had left it there on purpose, not dropped, not lost, placed. I took it inside and sat with it at the kitchen table for almost an hour before I even opened it. Inside, it was filled with old newspaper clippings, all glued in, page after page. Most of them were small blurbs, local news stories from the 90s and early 2000s. A couple were from my neighborhood, fires, arrests, obituaries. About 15 pages in, I found one that made me stop. It was about my dad. Not a headline or anything, just a few paragraphs buried in a community column about a union protest at a construction site. His name was there, and next to it a photo I had never seen before. Grainy, black and white, but unmistakably him, standing with a group of guys all wearing hard hats. He was looking off to the side, not at the camera. Someone had circled his face in pen. No caption. I flipped through more pages, faster now. The farther I got, the more the clippings shifted. Less local news, more personal. One article was about a missing person, a teenage boy from another borough. No real connection to my dad or me, as far as I could tell. But that one had a note scribbled in the margin. Too late. Another article was about a fire in an abandoned building. No injuries, just property damage. The next page was blank, just an old Polaroid taped to the center. It showed a door, just a door, unmarked, wooden. Could have been anywhere. It made my stomach turn, not because of what it showed, but because I recognized the doormat. It was the same one from the building across the street, beige with a tear in the corner. I had passed it 100 times. That night, I stood outside that door. I didn't knock. I didn't even step close. I just watched it, long enough to know no one was coming or going, long enough to convince myself I had imagined the whole thing. I left the building and went home. The next morning, my doormat was gone. Just gone. The floor was clean, like someone had picked it up and shaken it out. Nothing else disturbed, just that one detail removed. I wish I could say that was the moment I called someone, a friend, a therapist, even the police. But I didn't. Instead, I went back to the book. Near the end, tucked between 2 pages, I found a torn envelope. Inside was a single Polaroid. It was me again. Same angle as before, same position in bed, but this time the camera had pulled back. You could see more of the room. And standing at the foot of the bed in the shadows was a figure. Not fully visible, just the outline, but enough to see the broad shoulders, the jacket, the limp. This time the photo wasn't just proof that someone had been there. It was a message. I was not alone. I had never been alone. And whoever this was wearing my dad's face, or pretending to, they were done waiting. They were showing me what they wanted me to see, piece by piece. I kept the second photo in a drawer next to the first one, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't bring myself to destroy it. It felt like crossing a line, like if I tore it up or threw it away, something might escalate. I didn't say that out loud, obviously. I didn't even want to admit it to myself. But the thought was there, stuck in the back of my mind like a splinter. Over the next few days, I checked the hallway every morning before opening my door. No more books, no more notes, no more photographs, but I still felt like I was being watched. That part never went away. I stopped sleeping with my bedroom door shut. I started leaving lights on in the living room and kitchen. I started using my phone camera to take pictures of the locks before I went to sleep, just to reassure myself that I had actually locked them. The day after I found the second photo, I walked to the building across the street, the one with the doormat I had seen in the Polaroid. I didn't do anything dramatic, just walked past slowly, eyes down. The door looked the same, still unmarked, still closed, But the mat was different now, newer, same color, but clean, no rip in the corner. That could have meant anything. Still, something about it made my chest tighten. I thought about buzzing random apartments, pretending I had the wrong floor, but that felt risky. I wasn't ready for a confrontation. I was barely holding it together as it was. I walked home and didn't go back the rest of the week. I kept thinking about the note, "You forgot me." It had stopped sounding like a threat. It felt more like something personal, like whoever was doing this really believed I had wronged them somehow, that I had abandoned something important. And then I started thinking about my dad. Not the image from the bus stop or the fake version standing in the photo, but the real man, the one I remembered growing up. He was rough sometimes, quiet but strict, didn't like being questioned. Didn't show a lot of affection, but he tried in his own way. Left me tools instead of birthday cards. Took me to work sites instead of ball games. That was his version of bonding. We weren't close near the end. He got sick fast, and I wasn't good at hospitals. I visited less than I should have. When he died, I think I let the whole thing fade quicker than I was supposed to. I boxed up his stuff and barely looked back. I never really grieved, not properly. Maybe that was part of this. Maybe this was my brain pulling up some guilt I had never dealt with. That night, I sat in the kitchen with all the lights off and tried to remember the sound of his voice. It didn't come easily. That scared me more than anything. The next morning, there was something new on my table. I swear I locked every window and door. I checked the photo of the locks on my phone. Everything was just as I left it. But sitting on the center of the table was an envelope. Just one, unsealed, no writing on the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. There were 5 names written on it, all in the same handwriting as before. Careful, neat, like someone who took their time. I didn't recognize any of them. I typed each one into a search bar. The first was a woman who went missing 10 years ago in Brooklyn. The second was a man who died in a fire, same neighborhood. The third was listed in a court case as a witness who later recanted. The fourth had no results at all. The fifth one had an obituary, cause of death listed as undetermined. I stared at that list for a long time, not knowing what to do with it. Were these victims? Witnesses? Was this a threat? A confession? Why was it left for me? What did it have to do with my father? I pulled out the old black book again, the one I found on my doorstep. I flipped through the clippings. Some of the names matched, not all, but 2, one from the fire, one from the court case. I hadn't noticed the overlap before. Now I started wondering if someone was using me to relive something, or maybe to finish something. I went back to the hallway camera feed on my phone. I had installed it years ago when packages started getting stolen. I had stopped checking it regularly, but now I scrubbed through the last 2 nights. Around 3 in the morning, I found it. A figure, blurred by the poor lighting, approached my door slowly, crouched down, stayed in frame for less than 10 seconds. No face visible, jacket hood up, broad shoulders, same shape. They left the envelope, then turned and walked away, not in a rush, like they knew no one would be watching. I saved the clip. I didn't send it to anyone. I didn't report it. I just watched it 3 times in a row, trying to see something that would help me feel less like I was unraveling. I couldn't. That night I didn't try to sleep. I sat up in bed with the list beside me. I read each name out loud, quietly, like I was trying to bring them into the room, like maybe one of them would mean something if I heard it in my own voice. And then I remembered something. A photograph I hadn't looked at in years, an old one, from my dad's workshop. I pulled out the box I had stored his things in. At the bottom was a faded picture of him standing in front of the garage. Behind him were 3 men, none of them labeled. I had always assumed they were just co-workers. Now I wasn't so sure. Because one of them, I swear, had the same face as the man from the hallway camera. And if I was right, that meant this didn't start last week. It started a long time ago. And maybe I was just the next person on the list. I sat with that photograph for a long time, not doing anything with it, just looking. The guy in the back third from the left, same jawline, same shoulders, same posture as the one from the hallway camera. The hair was shorter, and he looked younger, but something about the way he held himself made my stomach knot. There was a familiarity in how he angled his body slightly away from the camera, as if even then he didn't want to be seen head-on. I flipped the photo over. Blank. No names, no date. It looked like it had been taken in the early 2000s, maybe earlier. My dad was clean-shaven, which he hadn't been since I was in high school. The garage in the background had the old sign still up, Brenner and Sons Contracting, before they dropped the and Sons and just went by initials. I hadn't thought about that in years. The rest of that day passed in a fog. I didn't eat much. I left the envelope with the 5 names out on the table, lined up beside the black book. I didn't know what I was supposed to do next. I wasn't a detective. I wasn't even sure I wanted answers anymore. It was starting to feel like the deeper I looked, the more I lost control of the story, like it wasn't mine anymore. Like it had shifted from something happening to me into something I was being dragged into. I went outside for a while just to get air, walked 3 blocks up and 2 over, didn't talk to anyone, just tried to move, tried to feel normal. It didn't work. Every face I passed looked a little too sharp. Every noise made me jump. I kept checking windows, checking reflections. I couldn't help it. That night I didn't plan to stay up, but my body wouldn't let me rest. Around 2:30 in the morning, I heard something. It wasn't loud, just a faint shuffle near the back window, the one in the bathroom. It's frosted glass, so you can't really see through it, just shapes, outlines. But there was definitely movement. Just for a second. I waited, holding my breath. Nothing followed. Still, I grabbed my phone and stepped into the hallway. I didn't want to call the police. I didn't have anything solid to tell them, but I was done pretending this was normal. I called Kayla instead. She was the only person I trusted to believe me without jumping to conclusions. We hadn't talked in months, but I didn't care. I needed someone else to hear what was happening. I kept my voice low. "Someone's been in my place," I said, more than once. There was silence on the other end for a second. Then she said, "Is this about your dad?" That threw me. I hadn't mentioned him yet, not directly, just said someone had been watching me, leaving things. "How did you know that?" I asked. Another pause. Then she said, "Do you remember that night he picked us up from the movies in high school? You fell asleep in the back seat." I didn't answer. "I heard him talking to someone in the front," she said, "but no one else was there." I remembered that night, barely. It had snowed earlier in the day. The windshield had fogged up. I thought he was just talking to himself. I didn't even think it was weird at the time. He said something like, "It's not time yet," she said, and then, "He'll remember when he's ready. I never asked him about it." I sat down on the floor, cold tile beneath me, still holding the phone. I didn't know what to say. She spoke again. I don't think it was a stranger at the bus stop. My throat felt tight. "I think it was someone he knew," she said. "Someone he brought around once, a long time ago. I saw him in a picture in your house once. In the background. I always remembered his eyes." Neither of us said anything for a while after that. Eventually, I hung up and sat in the dark for what felt like hours, trying to piece together how far back this went. If it was about my dad, and if other people had noticed something strange even when he was alive, then maybe it wasn't about me at all. Maybe I was just caught in the spillover of something older. When the sun came up, I went back to the photo. The garage, the three men, my dad in front. I scanned it again and noticed something I hadn't before. There was a door behind them, just barely visible, partially open, and someone was standing just inside it, almost hidden by shadow. Only half their face visible, and that face looked exactly like mine. Not similar. Exactly. My blood ran cold, but not in the dramatic movie way, more like a full body quiet. My fingers felt numb, my ears rang a little. I had no memory of being at that garage, no memory of ever being near that place while my dad was working. But it was me, or someone who wore my face, not like the man at the bus stop. This one was younger. My age now. Same expression I'd seen in the mirror 100 times. And suddenly, I remembered what Kayla said. "He'll remember when he's ready." I put the photo down, stared at the wall, and asked myself the question I had been avoiding since the beginning. What if this wasn't someone copying my dad? What if this was about who he thought I would become? And what if he wasn't wrong? I stopped trying to explain it. That was the only way I could move forward. I had spent too much time tying everything together like it was a puzzle that just needed one more piece. One more clue, one more memory, one more old photo. But the more I tried to make sense of it, the more I felt like I was circling something that didn't want to be solved. It took me a while to realize it wasn't a mystery. It was a fracture, a slow tear in the line between memory and reality, between what I knew and what I believed. The day after I found the photo with my own face in the background, I went through every box I had from my dad's old life, every paper, every photo, every scrap I'd saved out of guilt more than sentiment. I looked for any mention of the men in that garage photo. There was nothing, no names, no notes. The picture itself had no context, just four men outside a shop and one barely visible figure in the dark. I didn't recognize myself in that photo, not really. But the face was mine, and that meant something was wrong, not supernatural, not sci-fi, just wrong in a quieter, heavier way. I started writing everything down, not to publish or show anyone, just to track it, to put it somewhere outside my head. If I could pin it to paper, maybe I could separate what had happened from what I thought had happened. The bus stop, the photo under my door, the book, the names, the list. The fact that someone or something kept showing up wearing my dad's face or my own and leaving pieces behind. I thought about getting help. I thought about it a lot. There were moments, quiet ones, usually around 4 in the morning, where I was almost sure I was having a break. Not a dramatic collapse, just a steady drift into something I couldn't walk back from. I hadn't told anyone everything, not Kayla, not even myself. I had only hinted, and I knew why. Because the part I was afraid to admit out loud was that I didn't want it to stop. That sounds awful, but it's the truth. Somewhere in all the fear and confusion, there was this undercurrent of meaning, like whoever or whatever was behind it all had been trying to show me something real, not to hurt me, but to remind me. Of what, I wasn't sure, but it felt like it had to do with my dad, with the kind of man he had been, with the kind of man he thought I was going to be. I started hearing things again. Not whispers, not voices, just sounds, in the vents, in the hallway. At first I thought it was paranoia, but then I started recording them. Not with my phone, but with an old handheld recorder I found in one of my dad's boxes, the kind with the little cassette tapes. I'd leave it running at night. In the morning, I'd play it back. Mostly static, a few creaks. One night, there was a voice, not loud, not clear, but real. It said, "You're almost there." That was all. Just that one sentence. I played it over and over until the tape wore out. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't know how. The next night, I slept better than I had in weeks. No nightmares, no waking up in a sweat, just sleep. And when I woke up, there was a third photo. This time it was not inside the apartment. It was outside, under the mat at the front door, which was strange because I had not replaced the mat since it went missing. But there it was, the same mat, same tear in the corner. The photo showed me walking away from a building. My building, shot from behind. I was wearing clothes I hadn't worn in years, a jacket I gave away after college, sneakers I threw out after they split. My hair was shorter. My posture looked different. I almost didn't recognize myself. But it was me. The timestamp, if it could be believed, was dated 5 years earlier. And suddenly I remembered something I hadn't thought about in forever. There had been a night back then, around the time of my dad's funeral, when I thought I saw someone following me on the train platform. I remembered the way I kept looking over my shoulder, the way I walked home faster than usual, the way I told myself it was nothing. And now I was looking at proof that someone had been following me, back then, before the bus stop, before the photo, before the whisper. It had started earlier than I realized. Maybe it had never really stopped. I didn't panic. I didn't run. I just sat down on the steps and held the photo in both hands. And I realized something else. I was never supposed to figure it out. This wasn't about solving a mystery. This was about confronting a part of myself I had tried to bury: grief, guilt, memory, fear, all the stuff I had packed away after my dad died. All the things I told myself didn't matter. The quiet inheritance no one talks about. The mental cracks that start to spread when you pretend you're fine for too long. So I stopped pretending. I started therapy. It's not dramatic, no big revelations yet, but I'm talking, I'm asking questions, I'm sleeping better. Sometimes I still hear things. A cough in the vent, a knock that no one else hears. Sometimes I think I see him, my dad, not the one from the bus stop, the real one, just out of the corner of my eye, standing in doorways, watching me as I move from one room to the next. But I don't run from it anymore. I just nod. Because I think maybe this whole time that's all he wanted. For me to see what he left behind. For me to face it. And now, finally, I am. I was driving late, way later than I had planned. You know how it is when you tell yourself you will push through the fatigue, just a couple more hours, and then your eyes start burning and you catch yourself drifting in the lane. I knew I needed to stop. There was no way I was making it another 2 hours to the city without putting myself or someone else at risk. I pulled off at an exit with one gas station and a flickering neon sign for a motel. It was one of those places that looked like it had not been updated since the 70s. The kind of place where the office smells like stale coffee and the carpet has that sticky texture from years of neglect. The guy at the desk barely looked at me. He slid over a key with a plastic tag attached and muttered the room number. The parking lot was mostly empty. I parked close to my door under one of the buzzing yellow lights and hauled my bag inside. The room was what I expected. A bed with mismatched sheets, a heavy old TV that probably had not worked in years, and wallpaper that had bubbled and peeled in the corners. I have stayed in enough motels to know not to expect much. I just needed a bed and a locked door. I showered quick, let the water run cold, and stretched out on the bed with my phone. I was just starting to relax when I heard it. 3 quick knocks on the wall. Not loud, not aggressive, just precise. I froze, staring at the wall beside the bed. I thought maybe it was pipes or someone moving furniture in the next room, but then it happened again. 2 knocks, pause, then 3. It was too deliberate, too much of a pattern to be random. My first thought was maybe kids messing around, someone bored, trying to freak out whoever was unlucky enough to be in my room. But when I leaned close, the sound was right there. Not muffled like it would be if it were coming from the room next door. It was sharp, like the source was inches away. I tried ignoring it, pulled the covers up and told myself it was just an old building settling, but it kept coming back. Knock, knock, pause, knock, knock, knock. Over and over, sometimes faster, sometimes slower. After maybe 10 minutes of this, curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my phone and opened the voice recorder. I figured I would play it back later, maybe even look up the knock pattern to see if it meant anything. I pressed record and held the phone close to the wall. The knocks continued, steady now, like whoever was doing it knew I was listening. After maybe 30 seconds, it stopped. Total silence. My heart was racing. I checked the recording right away. At first, it was just what I expected, that hollow knocking sound. But then, right after the last knock, there was something else, a whisper. I had to play it 3 or 4 times before I was sure. It was faint, like it had been carried on the air or picked up by accident, but the words were clear enough once I caught them. Do not stay in this room. I dropped the phone onto the bed like it had burned me. My chest tightened, and for a moment I thought maybe I was imagining things. Maybe it was some weird distortion, the mic picking up my own breath and twisting it. But the more I played it back, the more certain I became. The whisper was not me. The voice was lower, rougher. It came after the knocks had stopped. I sat there with the room too quiet around me. The hum of the light outside leaked through the curtains, and the air smelled faintly of mildew. I remember thinking, what if someone was actually inside the wall? What if this place had crawl spaces or some kind of hidden area between rooms? I got up and pressed my ear to the wall. Nothing, just silence. I knocked once, lightly, and waited. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. I do not know if I was disappointed or relieved. I sat back on the bed and tried to shake it off. Told myself it was probably interference. Maybe a recording flaw. Some kind of feedback. My logical brain wanted an explanation. Any explanation that was not the obvious one. But I could not ignore the way the words seemed aimed at me. A warning. Do not stay in this room. I considered packing up and leaving right then. But the thought of getting back on the highway half asleep felt worse. I told myself I would sleep with the light on, just in case. It was not like motels did not have their weird quirks. People probably complained about strange noises all the time. Still, when I finally managed to drift off, I dreamed of knocking. Loud, endless, coming from inside the walls, the floor, even the ceiling. I woke up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, the recorder still clutched in my hand. For the rest of the night I did not hear another sound, but I did not feel alone. The morning after that first night, I woke up feeling like I had barely slept at all. My head was heavy, my mouth dry, and my heart still racing in my chest like I had been running. It took me a minute to remember where I was. That motel room looked even worse in daylight. The wallpaper was yellowed, the ceiling tiles water-stained, and there was a faint smell of something sweet and rotten that the air conditioner could not cover. I sat there for a while, just staring at the wall where the knocking had come from. In daylight, it was just a wall, cheap plaster painted a dull beige, no marks, no cracks. Nothing to suggest that someone or something had been right there on the other side just hours earlier. But it felt different, like a place where sound should not have come from. I pulled up the recording on my phone again, even though I hated listening to it. The knocks were there, hollow and deliberate, and then that whisper. I turned the volume up and held it to my ear, straining for details. The voice was not mine. It was not even close. There was something rough in it, something strained, like it came from deep in the throat. I kept hearing the same words, though, as clear as before. Do not stay in this room. I wanted to ask the clerk about it, but I also felt stupid. I mean, what was I supposed to say? Hey, I think there is someone in your walls whispering at your guests. Instead, I wandered into the office pretending I just wanted coffee. The clerk looked up from his newspaper, his eyes dull and tired. He asked if everything was all right, and for a second I almost told him. But then the words stuck in my throat. I mumbled something about the room being drafty and grabbed a styrofoam cup of the burned coffee they had sitting on the counter. He did not press me, just gave a half smile like he had heard every complaint in the world and did not care about any of them. I thought about checking out, but something held me back. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was stubbornness, maybe it was just exhaustion making me stupid. Whatever it was, I stayed. I told myself I would spend the day out, only come back late enough to collapse into bed without thinking too much about it. So that is what I did. I drove aimlessly for a while, found a diner, ate eggs and toast that tasted like grease and salt, and then killed time walking around a strip mall. But the whole time, my thoughts circled back to that wall, that whisper, that warning. When I finally returned that evening, the sun was dipping low, throwing long shadows across the parking lot. My room looked the same, but stepping inside gave me the same tight feeling in my chest as the night before, like the air was thicker there. I tried to shake it off. I showered, put on fresh clothes, and told myself I would try to get a proper night of rest. But the knocking started again. It was later this time, maybe just after midnight. I had just turned out the light when it came. Soft at first, 2 knocks, pause, 3, the same rhythm as before. My body tensed instantly, like I had been waiting for it. I sat up in bed, staring at the wall. I whispered, "What do you want?" My voice sounded thin and shaky. The knock stopped. Silence filled the room so heavy it felt like pressure in my ears. I thought maybe I had scared it off, or maybe it had just been some weird coincidence both nights. I lay back down, trying to calm myself, but then came a new sound. Not knocks this time. Scratching. Slow, deliberate, like fingernails dragging across wood. I shot up and flicked on the lamp. The sound stopped instantly. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might be sick. The wall looked the same as always, plain and innocent. I sat awake for hours after that, lights on, phone clutched in my hand. Eventually I must have drifted off, because the next thing I knew it was morning again. This time I could not ignore it. I went back to the office and asked straight out if anyone had ever complained about my room. The clerk froze. His face did not change much, but I saw his eyes flicker, like he knew exactly what I was talking about. He leaned back in his chair and said, "What kind of complaint?" I told him about the knocking, about the scratching. I did not mention the recording or the whisper, just waited to see how he reacted. For a long moment he just stared at me. Then he said quietly, "That room is supposed to stay empty." I did not know what to say. He looked at me like he had already said too much. Then he shook his head and waved a hand. "Old building, pipes, wiring, all kinds of sounds. You get used to it." But the way his voice shook told me that was not what he really believed. I went back to my room unsettled. I thought about packing my bag and leaving, but somehow that felt harder than staying. My chest felt tight, my palms sweaty, but I sat on the edge of the bed staring at that wall. I tried not to imagine what might be behind it. A crawl space, a hidden room, something worse. I kept replaying the clerk's words. That room is supposed to stay empty. I do not know why I did it, but I moved the nightstand away from the wall and started tapping along it, just light taps, listening for a hollow sound. Most of it felt solid, but near the corner the sound changed, thinner, more hollow. I pressed my ear to it and held my breath. For a while, nothing. Then, faint as anything, I heard it, breathing, slow and heavy, like someone asleep inches away. I stumbled back, my whole body shaking. My first thought was to run straight to the office and demand answers, but instead, I sat there, heart pounding, staring at that spot in the wall. When the knocks started again that night, I did not record them. I did not need to, because this time, I could feel them vibrate through the floor under my bare feet. I told myself I would not stay another night. That was my plan. I was going to pack my bag, throw it in the trunk, and drive until I found some other cheap room, or even sleep in the car if I had to. But plans are easy in the morning. By evening, when the sky was turning purple and the parking lot lights buzzed on, I was still in that same room. It is strange how fast a place can dig into you. I felt like if I left without knowing more, it would follow me. The sound, the breath, whatever it was. My brain kept circling the same thought. If I left too soon, I would never know what was behind that wall. Curiosity mixed with fear until I could not untangle them anymore. I tried to keep myself busy. I walked the length of the lot twice. I smoked cigarettes even though I had quit years ago, buying a pack from the vending machine by the ice. I told myself the nicotine would calm me down. It did not. My hands still shook. When I finally went back to the room, I noticed something new. The nightstand I had dragged away from the wall was back in place, perfectly aligned, like it had never been moved. I stood there staring at it, my throat dry. I had left it crooked, I was sure of it. I checked the lock on the door. It was still latched. The curtains were still shut. Nothing looked disturbed, but that little detail stuck in my head like a splinter. I tried to distract myself with the television. Grainy sitcom reruns, washed out by static, voices too cheerful for the kind of room I was sitting in. I left it on for background noise, because silence felt worse. Around midnight the knocking began again. Not sharp this time, not deliberate like the earlier patterns, softer, almost like testing, as if whoever or whatever was behind the wall wanted to see if I was paying attention. I muted the television and sat very still, straining my ears. The knocks came in threes, uneven, followed by that faint dragging sound. I wanted to grab my phone, to record it again, but something stopped me. Maybe I was afraid of what I might catch on playback this time. Instead, I whispered, "What do you want?" The silence that followed was crushing. My skin prickled, every hair on my body standing up. Then, clear enough to make me flinch, came 3 knocks. Not from the wall this time, but from the headboard directly behind me. I shot up out of bed so fast I nearly tripped. My chest burned with panic. I flicked the light on and stared at the headboard. Nothing, no cracks, no holes, just cheap wood bolted to the frame. I left the light on after that. I sat in the chair by the desk, knees bouncing, waiting for dawn. Sleep was out of the question. My thoughts spun in frantic circles. At some point, I must have dozed off anyway, because I woke with the sun glaring through the curtain slit. My back ached from the stiff chair, my mouth bitter from stale coffee and cigarettes. For a moment, I almost convinced myself I had dreamed it all, but then I noticed something on the desk. A crumpled piece of wallpaper, beige, patterned with faint flowers, peeled at the edges. I touched the wall beside the bed and found a fresh patch missing, as if something had been pulled from inside during the night. I carried the scrap to the office. The clerk was not there, just a different woman with frizzy hair and a distracted look. I asked her about the room, about the noises. She frowned and said she had only started the job last week, did not know much. When I pressed, she shrugged and said, "Old buildings make sounds, especially the ones with sealed rooms." The words hit me like ice water. Sealed rooms. I asked what she meant, but she seemed to realize too late she had said too much. She muttered about renovations years ago, then excused herself into the back office and never returned. I wandered back to my room in a daze. Sealed rooms. I stared at the wall, the missing wallpaper, the faint outline where the paint was just a little darker. By afternoon, I was pacing. My hands itched to know what was behind there. I tried pushing at the wall, tapping it, listening for weak spots. Nothing gave way. I thought about using my car jack or smashing the lamp against it, but I stopped myself. Because what if it was not empty? That thought clung to me like a shadow. What if the voice was right, and I should not stay in that room at all? What if leaving the wall intact was the only thing keeping me safe? The hours stretched on. I avoided lying down on the bed. I could not bring myself to sit with my back to the headboard. Instead, I sat in the chair again, lights blazing, television murmuring nonsense. Sometime in the early hours, when exhaustion was pulling me under, I heard something new. Not knocking, not scratching. A voice. Faint, muffled, but clear enough to understand if I leaned close to the wall. It was humming, a tune, slow and broken, like a lullaby sung through clenched teeth. My chest clenched so hard I thought I might stop breathing. I stumbled back, hand over my mouth, tears stinging my eyes. I did not want to hear it. I did not want to know. But the sound kept going, steady, patient, as if it had all the time in the world. I sat frozen until dawn. When the humming finally stopped, I realized my cheeks were wet with tears I had not noticed falling. In daylight, the wall looked the same. The patch of missing wallpaper, the faint stain, nothing else. But I could still hear the tune in my head, looping endlessly. That morning, I drove out for breakfast at the diner. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone in the back seat. My hands shook on the wheel. The waitress asked if I was all right. I told her I had not slept. She smiled politely and poured more coffee, not pressing. When I went back to the motel, the door to my room was open. Just a crack. My stomach dropped. I had locked it. I knew I had. I pushed it open slowly, heart pounding, breath shallow. The bedspread was rumpled. The lamp was on the floor. And on the nightstand sat another piece of peeled wallpaper, folded neatly into a square. When I saw that folded square of wallpaper on the nightstand, My stomach clenched like I had swallowed ice. It was too neat, too deliberate, not some scrap fallen overnight. Someone or something had peeled it and left it there like a note. I stood in the doorway for a long time, trying to decide whether to step inside. Eventually, I forced myself to move. The first thing I did was check the bathroom. Nothing. The closet. Empty. Under the bed. Clear. But the whole time I was down on my knees, peering into that narrow, shadowed space. I could not shake the feeling that I was doing it wrong, that the real thing to fear was not under the bed, but behind the wall. I sat on the edge of the mattress, staring at the square of wallpaper. The pattern looked different than the first scrap. This one was faintly darker, like it had been pulled from deeper inside, where the light never touched. When I unfolded it, the backside was covered in faint pencil marks. Scribbles that almost looked like writing, but not in any language I recognized. Tiny loops and scratches, cramped like someone had written it in the dark with shaking hands. I shoved it into my backpack. I did not want it on the nightstand staring at me. That night I made a plan. I would not wait for the knocking to start again. I would try to catch it before it reached me. I pulled the desk chair against the far wall and sat with my ear almost pressed to the spot where the wallpaper had been peeled. My heart thudded in my chest, and every small sound made me flinch. I must have looked insane, crouched there in silence, holding my breath for minutes at a time. It took hours, but finally it came, a single knock, light, almost polite, like testing if I was still there. Then another, farther along the wall, as if something was moving sideways. I whispered, "I hear you." The knocking stopped. Silence pressed in thick and heavy. For a moment I thought I had scared it off, or maybe I was scaring myself. Then came a whisper, so faint I thought I had imagined it. It was not a word, more like a breathy hiss, but it was close, too close. I jerked back from the wall, knocking the chair over. The air smelled strange then. Not smoke, not mold, but sweet, almost metallic, like rust mixed with flowers left to rot. It filled the room so suddenly I gagged. I threw open the door to get fresh air, standing in the threshold until I could breathe again. The hallway was empty, still, lit by buzzing fluorescent lights. When I closed the door, I noticed something new. The wallpaper square in my backpack was gone. The zipper was still closed, my bag exactly where I had left it, but the folded scrap had vanished. I barely slept, jerking awake at every creak. At dawn, I went straight to the office, demanding answers. The same clerk from before was there, the one who had slipped about sealed rooms. I slammed my palms on the counter and asked what had happened in that part of the building. She gave me a long, tired look. Then she said quietly, "That room was supposed to be locked." I told her I had checked in fair and square, key in hand. She shook her head. "That whole wing was shut down. Renovations never finished. You should not be in there." Her voice wavered like she regretted speaking. She ducked into the back office before I could ask anything else, leaving me staring at the counter. I walked back slowly, legs trembling. If the room was not supposed to be open, then why was I given a key? Why was the bed made, the lamp working, the shower running hot water? None of it made sense. Back inside, I tried to convince myself I was done, that I would check out immediately and drive until the whole place was behind me. I even started stuffing clothes into my bag. But when I reached for the backpack zipper, something slipped out. Another square of wallpaper, not the one I had lost, but a fresh piece, folded the same way. My throat went dry. I left the bag half-zipped and unfolded it with shaking fingers. This one was different. On the back, written in jagged pencil strokes, were 3 words: "Do not stay." I dropped it like it was burning me. My chest heaved, eyes stinging with tears. I wanted to run, to get in the car and never look back. But some sick part of me felt like if I left then, I would only take it with me. Like whatever was inside the wall had already moved closer, had already found me. That night I could not bring myself to turn off the light. The room buzzed with the lamp's weak glow, shadows thick in the corners. I sat on the chair, facing the wall, waiting. The humming started again. Louder this time, almost tuneful, rising and falling like a voice trying to form words. Then came the knock, steady and slow. I felt my body freeze, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. The humming grew louder until I could make out faint syllables, but they were twisted, broken, like a mouth that had forgotten how to speak. My name surfaced in the mess of sounds, warped but recognizable. Hearing it broke something in me. I clapped my hands over my ears and curled forward, whispering, "No, no, no." The lamp flickered then, buzzing hard, shadows stretching across the walls like they were moving on their own. I squeezed my eyes shut, too terrified to look. When I opened them again, the wallpaper on the far wall was bulging outward, like something pressing from the other side. I scrambled back, knocking into the bed. My breath came in sharp gasps. The bulge sank away slowly, leaving only the faint outline of stains on the wallpaper. The humming cut off in an instant. I stayed awake until dawn, too terrified to close my eyes. My whole body shook with exhaustion, my teeth chattering though the room was warm. When sunlight finally seeped through the curtain, I gathered my things and stumbled out into the parking lot. I did not care about checkout, I just needed to get away. But as I unlocked my car, I saw something that made my hands go limp. Tucked under the windshield wiper was another folded square of wallpaper. I stood there in the parking lot with the morning sun hitting my face, staring at that folded square of wallpaper under the windshield wiper like it might burst into flames if I touched it. The whole lot was empty except for my car and two other rusted-out sedans, both covered in dew, clearly untouched overnight. No one was there, no movement in the office windows, no footsteps in the gravel, and yet someone had come close enough to slip this thing under my wiper. I yanked it free with shaking hands. It felt damp, softer than the others, and when I opened it, the inside was worse than I had imagined. Instead of scribbles or words, the entire back was covered in smudged handprints. Small, pressed tight like a child's, dozens of overlapping prints that stained my fingertips when I held it. They smelled faintly of mold, like damp paper left in a crawl space too long. I shoved it into the glove compartment, slammed the door, and sat gripping the steering wheel. I should have driven away right then, but some part of me kept waiting, like maybe the clerk would come out, or someone would yell that I was making a mistake. Nothing happened. Just the buzz of insects and the faint hum of traffic somewhere miles away. I drove until my hands stopped trembling. An hour, maybe more. The clock on the dashboard was wrong, flashing 12 like it had been reset. I found a diner off the highway and sat in a booth trying to make sense of things. The waitress kept asking if I wanted more coffee, and every time she came over I jumped. The thought that someone might slip another piece of wallpaper onto the table when I wasn't looking made me want to bolt. By the time I reached home, I had convinced myself I would leave the whole thing behind. Just a nightmare, a weird night in a weird motel. That was all. I unpacked, showered, tried to sleep in my own bed, but sleep would not come. I kept hearing it, faint in my memory, that slow knocking rhythm. I lay there staring at the ceiling until morning. The next day at work, I could not focus. My phone buzzed with a notification, and when I opened it, my chest turned to ice. It was a picture message from an unknown number. The photo was of my house, taken from the street, and I was in it, standing at my own front window, blinds half drawn, except I had not been standing there. I had been in bed, trying to sleep. I nearly dropped the phone. My first thought was to call the police, but what would I say? Someone sent me a picture of my house. That was not enough. Not when I had no proof about the wallpaper or the knocking. It would sound like paranoia. That night, I did not sleep again. Around 2 in the morning, I heard it. Not loud, not on the wall this time, but faintly, through the vent near the ceiling. The same measured rhythm of knocks, spaced evenly, patient. I dragged the chair from my desk and climbed up to press my ear close. The metal rattled with each knock, like it was traveling through the whole ventilation system. I climbed down shaking and grabbed my phone. I wanted to record it again, to prove it was not in my head. But when I opened the recorder, the screen flashed and went black. Dead battery, even though it had been at 70% when I lay down. I could not go back to bed. I sat on the couch with every light on, staring at the vents. Around 3, the air shifted. It got heavy, like the pressure changed. My dog, usually lazy and unbothered, suddenly stood at the hallway entrance, hackles up, teeth bared at nothing. She barked once, low and sharp, then backed away, tail tucked between her legs. She would not go near the hallway for the rest of the night. The next morning I found something on the kitchen table that nearly made me vomit. A folded square of wallpaper. This one different from the others, though. The backside was blank, clean, but the front pattern was torn where it had been peeled. It matched the exact section I had first ripped away in the motel. I sat there staring at it, feeling my chest tighten. My house was not supposed to have that wallpaper. None of the walls here looked anything like it. But here it was, sitting on my table, like something had carried it across counties just to remind me that leaving had not saved me. For the rest of the day, I felt watched. Walking down the hall, standing at the sink, even in the bathroom, I felt eyes pressing against me. Every reflective surface made me jump. Not because I saw anything strange, but because I expected to. My own mirror felt dangerous. That night, I tried to fight it. I sprinkled salt across the vents, taped them shut, even dragged a heavy dresser against the bedroom door. I left the lights on again. By 3, exhaustion dragged me under, but I woke gasping. The smell was back. Sweet, metallic, rotten flowers. It filled the room so fast I gagged. When I sat up, heart pounding, I saw it. Not the figure itself, but the shadow. A long stretch of black reaching across the wall, cast from no source. The lamp glowed steady, the curtains drawn, but the shadow moved. Slow, dragging, like something pulling itself closer. I fumbled for my phone to snap a picture, but the screen stayed black, unresponsive. My dog whimpered from under the bed, pawing at the floor like she was trying to dig her way out. I wanted to scream, but my voice caught in my throat. The shadow stretched higher, curling toward the ceiling, and then stopped. Right above the bed, it bulged, pressing against the wall like something trying to push through. I could hear the faint scrape of nails on plaster. Slow and patient. I stayed frozen until dawn, staring at the wall until the shadow faded into nothing. When sunlight filled the room, I stood on trembling legs and checked. The plaster was cracked. Tiny hairline fractures spreading outward in the same square shape as the wallpaper scraps. I packed a bag right then. I could not stay another night. I did not know where I would go, but I knew I could not stay here. When I reached my car, my hands shook so badly I dropped the keys twice. I opened the door, slid behind the wheel, and froze. On the passenger seat was another square of wallpaper, folded neatly, waiting for me. I do not think I have ever driven so long without stopping. I must have gone through 3 states before the panic eased enough to breathe normally. Every mile I half expected to hear that knocking again, faint through the vents of the car, or to see another folded square of wallpaper flutter up from the passenger seat. But the road stayed empty, the radio silent. Only the steady hum of tires and the ache in my hands from gripping the wheel too tightly. I ended up at a roadside rest area sometime in the early afternoon, the kind with chipped vending machines and a single picnic table under a dying oak tree. I parked far away from the other cars and just sat there, staring at the folded square of wallpaper on the seat beside me. My first instinct was to throw it out the window, to crumple it and scatter it in the wind, but something held me back. Maybe curiosity, maybe fear of what might happen if I got rid of it. When I finally opened it, expecting more handprints or scratches, I saw something different. The inside was blank, except for one short line written in what looked like pencil. The words were shaky, as if scrawled by someone who had not held a pencil in years. It said, "Do not stay in this room." My stomach turned over. It was the exact same message I had heard whispered back through the recording that first night in the motel. The same words I had dismissed as static or imagination. Now written by a hand that did not feel like it belonged to any ordinary person. I sat at that rest stop for what must have been an hour, the paper trembling in my fingers. Then, finally, I made myself decide. I slid it into a plastic bag, sealed it, and shoved it deep in the trunk with my spare tire. I could not look at it anymore. For weeks after, I lived like a ghost. I stayed with a friend at first, pretending it was because my apartment lease was up. I kept every light on at night, and even then I slept only in short bursts. I jumped at any sound, any knock on the wall or floorboard creak, but nothing happened. No shadows, no smells, no handprints on the glass. It was like putting miles between me and that motel had thinned whatever thread was tied to me. But even now, months later, I still feel the weight of it. The way the air changed that night. The way the dog cowered like something older and hungrier than any person had filled the room. I have not gone back to the apartment. I told the landlord they could keep the deposit. I moved 2 towns over, to a newer building with no crawl spaces and central heating instead of vents. Still, sometimes the memories hit at odd moments. Standing in line at the grocery store, I will hear a faint tapping, like someone impatiently drumming their knuckles against a counter, and my heart stops cold. Or I will catch the smell of damp wallpaper in an old library or thrift store and have to leave before I choke on it. I kept one thing, though, that first recording, not the one that glitched out, but the original with the Morse code pattern. I still have it saved in the cloud, and every so often I listen to it again, like picking at a scab. The knocks are slow and steady, and when the faint whisper comes through, "Do not stay in this room," I feel the same chill that froze me that night. A warning, clear as day, that I had ignored. What unsettles me the most is not the thought that I was targeted or followed. It is the idea that I might have just stumbled into someone else's cycle, that those knocks were never meant for me at all, but for whoever stayed in that room before me. Maybe I was just the next in line, another stranger passing through. The message was a warning, not an invitation. I was too stubborn to listen until it was almost too late. I have told myself 100 times that it is over, that whatever lived in those walls, or behind them, is still there in that motel, waiting for the next traveler too cheap or too tired to keep driving. But there are nights, late, when I wake for no reason and sit up in the dark, heart pounding. I will sit there listening, holding my breath, waiting. And in that silence, I swear I can almost hear it. Not loud, not close, just a faint rhythm, like memory trying to claw its way back through time. 3 knocks, spaced apart, as patient as the grave. Maybe it is just in my head. Maybe it always was. But I know this much. I will never set foot in that town again. Never take another chance on a roadside motel with peeling paint and too few cars in the lot. I do not need proof. I lived it. And I still carry the smell, the sound, the weight of that presence in my bones. It is not gone. Not really. It is just waiting for someone else to open the wrong door, to peel back the wrong strip of wallpaper. And if you ever find yourself on that stretch of highway, tired enough to settle for any bed, I beg you, do not stay in that room. This is going to sound ridiculous, but I need to write it down. I haven't told anyone yet, not really, not properly. A few comments here and there, but nothing specific. I think part of me was hoping it would just stop on its own, but it hasn't. And now I'm at the point where I'm more scared of staying quiet than I am of someone calling me mad. So yeah, here it is. Every morning for the past 2 weeks, I've been waking up to handprints on the inside of my bedroom window. Not the outside, the inside. At first I didn't think much of it. I figured it was just condensation. You know how it is, weather gets cold, Air inside gets warm. Glass fogs up. Maybe I touched it without thinking. Maybe I rolled over in my sleep and left a smear. It happens, especially in old flats like mine where the insulation's not great and the windows sweat a bit overnight. So the first time I noticed it, I wiped it clean with my sleeve and forgot about it. Then it happened again and again. Always the same thing, faint handprints, greasy looking, not wet, not sticky, just smudges that picked up the light in a way you wouldn't notice unless you were looking right at them. Sometimes it was just one hand, sometimes two, but always low on the glass, like someone crouching, and always facing in. That's what started to get to me. They weren't pressed from the inside out. They were facing me, like someone had been looking in. That would be one thing if it were on the outside, maybe a drunk kid passing by, a curious neighbor's kid, something normal, but these weren't outside. They were behind the glass, where only I should be. I tested it more than once, cleaned the window completely, watched the condensation build, waited to see if anything appeared on its own. Nothing. Clean. Normal. Then I'd wake up the next morning and there they were again. Same prints, same shape, same position. I tried not to spiral. I told myself maybe I was doing it in my sleep. Maybe I was pacing, reaching for the glass, trying to check outside without remembering. That theory held up for a while until I noticed something else. The handprints were too small. Not child size, but smaller than mine. The fingers were narrower. The palms were shorter. I held my own hand up to the marks, and the difference was obvious. So now I was really paying attention. I started sleeping with the blinds half open so I could see the window from the bed. I set alarms to wake me up at different times through the night, just to see when the prints might appear. I cleaned the glass before going to bed, wrote the date in the corner with my finger. It always rubbed off when the new prints showed up. By the end of the first week, I was exhausted. I was barely sleeping, and when I did, it was restless and short. I kept jerking awake, thinking I'd heard something, a knock, a breath, a shuffle, just outside the door. But there was never anything there. The next step seemed obvious. I bought one of those cheap, motion-activated lights, the kind you stick to a window or wall, and it flashes when something moves in front of it. I placed it just outside, facing the window directly. The theory was simple. If anything moved past the glass, the light would trigger. I'd wake up, maybe catch something. The first night I used it, nothing happened. Second night, same thing. No flash, no noise. Just more fingerprints when I opened the blinds in the morning. That was when I stopped feeling like I was imagining it, because I was actively watching now. I was documenting things, taking pictures even. I had timestamps. It wasn't just in my head anymore. The light wasn't catching anything, but something was still getting through. So last night, I stayed awake. No alarms, no half-asleep guessing. I made coffee. I set myself up with a blanket on the end of the bed, faced the window, left the blinds open all the way. It was raining slightly, just that light mist that floats under streetlights. It made the glass look foggy, blurred the edges of everything outside. Nothing happened for hours. I scrolled, I read, I checked the light, still working. I could see the tiny sensor flash when I waved at it. 3 o'clock. then 3:30, then 4. And then at 4:06 I saw it. Not a person, not a shape, just the prints. They started to appear right in front of me. First one hand, then the other. Pale marks, slowly pressing against the inside of the window. Not all at once, it was like they were being laid there finger by finger, like someone was leaning in gently, letting each part of their hand settle softly into the glass. I froze. There was nothing in the room. No movement, no breeze, no reflection I could see. Just the prints forming slowly in the mist. And then, very quietly, right next to me, I heard a whisper. Close enough that I felt the air shift. It said, "You see me now." That's when I got up. Not fast. Just moved backward, still watching the window, still not seeing anything but the prints. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to. I slept with the light on after that. Well, I lay down with the light on. I don't think I actually slept. The next morning felt unreal. I stood by the window for what must have been 20 minutes just staring at the marks. I had watched them appear. I knew no one had touched the glass. I had not moved from the bed. I had seen them form, slowly, in real time. But now, in daylight, it was like the moment had never happened. They were faint, fainter than usual maybe. Still that greasy sort of smudge, like someone had been pressing the flat of their hand into the fogged glass and dragging downward. One hand slightly lower than the other, not smeared, just placed, deliberate. And the whisper, that voice, I hadn't dreamed it. I hadn't fallen asleep, not even for a second. I remembered exactly how it had sounded. Close, too close. Not loud, but not distant either. It was like the words had slid right up next to my ear before disappearing into the room behind me. You see me now. I didn't know what to do with that. I did what I always do when I don't know how to feel. I cleaned, took out the glass cleaner, wiped every inch of the window until there wasn't a single trace left, washed the cloth afterward, dried the sill, checked the frame, nothing unusual, no cracks, no drafts, just clean glass and that deep, nagging sense that something was going to come back. By noon I was convincing myself I had hallucinated it. Lack of sleep, maybe. The kind of thing your brain does when you're overtired and jittery. Except that didn't explain the prints. I hadn't touched the window. I had been watching it the entire time. My hands had stayed in my lap. I kept the blinds shut for most of the day. I didn't want to look out. I didn't want to risk seeing something looking in. I also didn't want my neighbors to see me staring at nothing. Eventually, I went out to the shop just to get some air. Brought back coffee, milk, snacks I didn't need, anything to feel normal again. Being outside helped for a little bit. I almost forgot how tightly wound I had been. The street looked like any other day. People coming and going, rain clinging to rooftops, a faint smell of petrol in the air. Familiar, unremarkable. That night, I didn't stay up. I told myself I would, but around midnight I started to feel heavy, like the lack of sleep was finally catching up. I still left the blinds open, though, still set my phone to record. I didn't want to wake up again with no clue what had happened. I dreamed something strange. Not a nightmare exactly, just a repeating image. Hands, dozens of them, pressing gently against the glass, not pounding or scratching, just touching, the way someone might push against a surface to test if it would move. And in the background, fog, thick and yellow-gray, the kind that makes everything feel distant even when it's close. I woke up at 6. Sun was already up, light stretching through the blinds. I sat up slowly and looked at the window. New prints, same size, same shape. Except this time, there were more of them. 3 on one side, 2 on the other, staggered slightly, like someone had pressed their hands against the glass and then shifted positions. The marks were clearer too, more defined. I could almost see the outline of the fingers, the slight bend where the palm met the wrist. I checked the video on my phone. It had recorded the entire night. No gaps, no power cuts, and nothing happened on it. No movement, no prints forming. Just me lying there, tossing and turning a few times, the window behind me staying still. I watched it twice. Still nothing. But the prints were there in the morning. I started to wonder if whatever this was, if it even was something could tell when it was being watched. The idea made my stomach turn. I didn't know how else to explain it. When I had been watching directly, the prints appeared in front of me, but when I tried to record them, nothing happened. The motion sensor outside still hadn't triggered either. It was working. I tested it every night. I even changed the batteries just to be sure. But it never flashed once. No birds, no wind, no movement. And yet the prints kept showing up. That day I didn't go out. I stayed in, curtains drawn, pacing from room to room. I tried to distract myself, music, phone calls, cleaning again. Nothing helped. I kept thinking about the prints. That whisper, the slow, dragging motion I'd seen the night before. I even tried calling a friend, but I couldn't bring myself to say the words out loud. I danced around it, mentioned not sleeping well, made a joke about the weather being creepy. She laughed. Said I needed rest, said I was probably just run down. Maybe she was right. But that night, something else happened. Around 2:30, I was half asleep when I heard a click. It came from the hallway. I sat up straight in bed, heart racing, trying to pinpoint the sound. Then I heard the second click. The lock on the front door, not the deadbolt, the latch. I got up, slowly, careful not to make noise. I didn't turn the lights on. I just stood in the bedroom doorway and listened. I swear I could hear breathing. Not heavy, just slow, controlled. I stayed frozen in place for what felt like hours. Eventually the sound stopped. I checked the door. Still locked. But the window, the prints were already there. I didn't move for a long time. After I saw the prints that night, fresh ones, clearer than ever, even with the room still dim, I just stood there in the doorway staring at them. I hadn't turned on the light yet. I didn't want to. Somehow it felt like doing that would make it worse, like it would acknowledge something I wasn't ready to face. There was no question this time. I hadn't been dreaming. I hadn't imagined anything. The lock had clicked, twice, the way it always does when someone comes in or out, but no one had. I checked the door over and over, still locked, still bolted. I even pulled it open just to be sure, like maybe something had slipped out before I got up, but the hallway was silent. Still, the way it gets around 3 in the morning, when the world feels thinner and quieter than it should. I went back to the window. The prints weren't where they had been before. They had shifted slightly, as if whoever was doing this had been moving while they touched the glass. Like they had leaned in, then stepped slightly to the left. Then right. One set of fingers had smudged across the glass in a curved line, as if tracing something. I didn't clean them right away. I stood in front of the window and tried to line up my own hand to the marks. Not even close. The size was different again. Too thin, too narrow. The fingers almost graceful in shape, like they belonged to someone smaller, maybe younger, but definitely not me. I turned the lights on, every one of them, left them burning all night. I sat in the kitchen until sunrise, staring at the back door, which I now realized I hadn't even checked. But it was locked, too. I checked all the windows again, every latch. Everything was shut. It was like whatever this was didn't care about doors, or locks, or whether I was awake or not. The next day, I called in sick. I couldn't focus, couldn't hold a thought long enough to type an email. I kept looking at the window. I tried not to, but I did. Every time I walked past, I checked to see if the prints had returned, even though it was still daylight. They hadn't. But the feeling had. That pressure in the air, that sense of someone standing just behind you when you're not looking. It stuck around like humidity, like a smell you can't place. That night, I didn't want to sleep in the bedroom. So I moved to the couch. I pulled the curtains in the living room halfway closed, enough to see out but still feel like I had some cover. I left the kitchen light on. I brought the flashlight with me and placed it on the coffee table next to my phone. And I waited. I wasn't trying to catch anything this time. I wasn't trying to be clever. I just didn't want to be taken by surprise. That was the worst part, how passive it made me feel. Like I was a background character in my own flat, just watching strange things happen around me with no say in any of it. I must have nodded off at some point, because I woke up to the sound of breathing. Not loud, not aggressive, but there. It was so close that at first I thought it was mine, that maybe I had been dreaming about it and carried the sound into waking, but I held my breath, and the sound kept going. Slow, rhythmic, measured. It was coming from the other side of the room. Not near the window this time. Near the hallway. I sat up, heartbeat pounding behind my eyes. The living room was still lit by the kitchen glow, just enough to cast long shadows across the carpet. I grabbed the flashlight and turned it on, swept the beam across the wall, toward the door. No one. But the breathing stopped the second I moved, like it had never been there. I didn't sleep again. That morning, there were no new prints on the bedroom window, but there was one on the hallway mirror, high up, near the top right corner, almost too high for me to reach without stretching. It was just a single palm, flat and smeared slightly downward, like someone had placed their hand there and slowly slid it. I tried to recreate it. My hand didn't match the angle, and it wasn't foggy in the hallway. There was no condensation, no heat difference, just the print, sitting there like a question. That was the day I started to consider something I hadn't before. What if this wasn't a ghost? I had been operating under the assumption that this was a haunting, a presence, something invisible but intelligent, trying to be seen. But now I wasn't so sure, because it felt closer than that. It felt like someone, not something. I started researching. Not supernatural stuff, not at first. I looked into break-ins, stalkers, anything that might explain what I was experiencing. I looked up cases where people had found out they were being watched without knowing it. I found a few, mostly horror stories on forums, probably made up, but a few stuck out. Stories where people found footprints in the attic dust, where food went missing from the fridge, where people realized too late that someone had been living nearby under the house or inside the walls. I didn't have an attic. I didn't have a basement either, but I started checking all the places I hadn't before. Behind the boiler, inside the old laundry cupboard, I pulled out drawers and opened the back panel under the sink. Nothing. Everything was clean, dusty, still. And yet the feeling hadn't gone. That night, I stood in the hallway for an hour. Lights off. Just waiting. And I swear at one point, I felt someone standing behind me. Not close, just outside reach. I didn't turn around. I just walked to the kitchen and stayed there until morning. I started keeping the television on at night, just low-volume background noise, usually some old nature documentary or a rerun of a show I did not have to follow too closely, anything with voices. Silence had started to make me nervous in a way it never had before. I used to like the quiet. Now it felt like it was waiting for something, or someone. The mirror stayed untouched for 2 days. No new prints. Nothing else moved or out of place. I actually started to think maybe whatever this was had passed through and left. I almost let myself believe it. But then the 5th night came. I had not been in the bedroom since the first whisper. I was still sleeping on the couch, if you could even call it that. It was more like short bursts of half-sleep, eyes closed but ears still on full alert. That night, I heard something new. It started just after 3. A sound like cloth dragging across the floor. Not loud, but steady. Not scratching, just a soft shift. I sat up instantly, heart already pounding, and listened. It came again, this time from the kitchen. I stood and waited. My flashlight was still on the table. I picked it up and moved slowly across the room, bare feet trying not to creak the floorboards too much. I was halfway to the doorway when it stopped. No movement, no sound. I flicked the light on. The kitchen was empty, but one of the cabinet doors was open. Only slightly. It was the one under the sink, the one I had checked a few days ago, when I started thinking maybe someone had been hiding. I walked over, pulled it open fully, crouched down, and aimed the flashlight inside. Nothing. Same cleaning bottles, same folded cloths, same dust in the corners. But the door had definitely been closed earlier. I closed it again, slowly, firmly, listened, waited. The air felt thick, like it does before a thunderstorm. I couldn't hear anything, but I could feel something, like the moment right before someone speaks your name. I left the light on that night, in every room. The next morning, the mirror had another print. Not high up this time. This one was right in the middle, a set of fingers pressed harder than before, so clear I could see the individual ridges where they curved. I almost called someone then. Almost. But what would I say? That a ghost was touching my glass? That someone invisible had been wandering around my flat, leaving oily fingerprints? I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. Then I did something I still don't really understand. I pressed my own hand into the print. Palm flat, fingers aligned as best I could. It was cold. Not the glass, the air. Just for a second. Like the temperature around my skin dropped the moment I touched it. Then it was gone. I pulled my hand away, and the print, the other one, had started to fade. I didn't even wipe it. It just faded on its own, like it had never been there. I spent the rest of the day trying to shake that feeling of touching something, not a surface, something else, like pressing your hand into the air and finding a pulse there. That night, I blocked the mirror with a blanket, pinned it up across the wall with tape, made sure the fabric was thick enough that I could not see anything behind it. Then I did the same with the bedroom window. I had already been avoiding it, but now I just wanted it gone from sight. I even unplugged the television. I could not listen to voices anymore. I wanted silence now, but not the natural kind. I wanted the kind that lets you hear what's really moving around. It was after midnight when I heard the whisper again. This time it came from behind the blanket. Same tone, same pitch, but a different sentence. It said, "I know you see me." Not loud, not angry, just said, as if we were already in the middle of a conversation. I sat perfectly still. Then it said it again. "I know you see me." And the blanket moved. Only a little. Just enough to shift at the bottom corner, like someone had breathed against it from the other side. I didn't look. I couldn't. I picked up the flashlight, pointed it at the blanket, and just kept it there. The fabric stilled. No more sound. No more whisper. But I left the light on it all night. By morning, the blanket hadn't moved again. I pulled it down slowly, half expecting to find new prints, or worse, nothing at all. But there was nothing. Just the mirror. Clear. Clean. Too clean. That was the first time I felt it, that whatever was happening wasn't just about fear. It was about being noticed. About attention. It wanted to be seen. Not in full. Not directly. But known. Acknowledged. I think blocking the mirror made it angry. And I think it spoke again just to remind me it was still here. Still watching. Still reaching. So now I am stuck in this place where I am afraid of seeing it, and more afraid of what might happen if I stop looking. I don't know which is worse. After the blanket shifted, I stopped sleeping. I don't just mean I stayed up late or had trouble drifting off. I mean I stopped even trying. Something in me just clicked over into this state of constant alert, like my body had decided sleep wasn't worth the risk anymore. I stopped turning off the lights at night. I started sitting upright in the chair by the kitchen table, sometimes for 5 or 6 hours, just staring down the hallway. I don't even remember feeling tired anymore, just wired. My thoughts would wander in circles, never really landing anywhere useful. I'd think about the prints, the whispers. That single sentence I kept hearing over and over again, "I know you see me." I kept asking myself what that meant, not just the words, but the fact that it had said them, that it wanted me to hear them, that it wanted me to know that it knew I had been watching. It didn't feel random. It felt like part of something bigger that I couldn't see. For 2 nights after that, nothing new happened. I thought maybe I had gone far enough, that covering the mirror and not speaking out loud anymore had stopped whatever it was from getting stronger. That maybe the thing in the flat or near the flat had decided I was no longer giving it what it wanted. But on the 3rd night, the window in the kitchen fogged up. I didn't see it happen, but I noticed it around 3 in the morning when I walked past to refill my glass. It was strange because the temperature in the flat hadn't changed, and none of the other windows had fogged. Just that one. I stepped closer, and that was when I saw it. The print was already there. A hand again, but this time the fingers were spread wider, pressed harder, almost like it had slammed its palm into the glass and left it there. There was a small line dragging down from one of the fingers, like it had slid slowly, not all the way down, just enough to make a streak. I stood there for a long time, just staring at it. I didn't clean it this time. I wanted to see what would happen if I left it. The next morning, the print was gone. Not faded. Gone. And there was a different one on the opposite side of the same window. That one was smaller, 2 fingers side by side, the rest of the hand not visible. Like someone had stood outside watching and placed only 2 fingers on the glass as if to say, "I can still touch this too." The thing that got to me most wasn't the prints themselves. It was how intentional they had become. These weren't random smudges or marks from sleepwalking. They were messages, patterns. They were placed to be noticed. That night, I left my phone recording again. Audio only this time. I left it on the table, facing the hallway. I didn't want to film anything. I didn't want to see movement. I just wanted to know if it made noise when I was asleep. I tried to rest for a few hours, curled up on the couch with the hallway light still on, blanket pulled halfway over my face. I didn't really sleep. I just drifted in and out. The next morning, I played the recording. It started with nothing. The usual creaks, the fridge, my own breathing. Then at exactly 3:13, I heard something new. First, the sound of 3 slow taps. They weren't sharp, just dull knocks, like someone pressing gently on wood. Then a whisper. It was not clear, not a word, just a sound, like a breath that almost turned into speech but did not finish. Then silence again. Then the taps returned, this time from closer, louder, but still soft, still careful. And then, finally, one more whisper, this one more distinct. It said, "Almost ready." That was it. The file ended with nothing else. Just that phrase, said so low, I had to turn the volume up to hear it properly. Almost ready. Ready for what? What was it waiting for? Was it me? Was it something I was supposed to do? I started writing everything down after that, not just in my head, not just for this post. I made a physical notebook with dates, times, what happened, what I heard, what I saw. It helped a little. It made it feel like I had some kind of control, like I could map out the pattern. But I could not find one. The only thing that was clear was this: it was getting closer. Not in distance, not exactly, but in intention. Everything was deliberate now, timed, chosen. The mirror, the windows, the kitchen, the whispers. It was not showing itself, but it wanted to be known. It wanted me to understand that it was here. The next night, I heard footsteps. Light ones, soft enough that I questioned it at first. I turned off the television and waited. They stopped, then started again. From the hallway, coming toward the living room. I stood up, heart thudding in my chest. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. They stopped just outside the doorway. I could not see anyone, but I could feel it. That same shift in the air, that same drop in temperature, the kind of pressure that makes your skin tighten and your throat close up. Then I heard the last sound I ever expected. Laughter. A single breath of laughter, not loud, not cruel, just amused. Then nothing. I sat down again and waited for morning. I stayed awake for 2 nights after that. Not in the way I had before, drifting in and out. I mean fully awake. Sitting on the floor with my back against the living room wall, lights on, blanket pulled up to my chin, flashlight in one hand and the other gripping a cold cup of tea that I never drank. Every little sound had weight to it. Every creak, every shift in the air, every faint brush of wind outside the window, all of it felt loaded. But nothing happened. No new prints. No whispers. No breathing. By the 3rd night, my body was giving up. I could feel it in the way my thoughts kept looping, the way my eyes burned even when I blinked, the dull ache in the back of my neck from sitting too still for too long. I knew I couldn't keep going like that. Whatever it was, ghost, hallucination, intruder, something worse, it wanted me to unravel, and it was working. So I did something that might sound strange, but at the time, it felt like the only option I had left. I talked to it. Out loud. It was nearly 4 in the morning. I was alone. The window was clear. The mirror was still covered. Nothing was moving. The flat was dead silent. And I just said, "I see you. I know you're here." And I waited. Nothing. So I kept going. "I don't know what you want, but I don't want this anymore." Still nothing. I started talking to it the way you might talk to something in a dream, not commanding it, not challenging it, just naming it, saying it out loud so it didn't feel so impossible. "If you want to be seen, fine. You've been seen." The words felt ridiculous. I was half expecting to laugh, but I didn't, because the air had changed, again. It got heavier. Not colder, just dense, like the pressure dropped in the room. I stood up. My knees ached from being bent so long, but I ignored it. I walked into the bedroom and pulled down the blanket covering the mirror. Nothing. Then I walked to the window. and opened the blinds. Still nothing. But when I turned around to head back to the living room, I saw something that stopped me cold. On the wall, just above the skirting board, there was a handprint. It wasn't greasy like the others. It looked burned, like a faint black smudge pressed into the paint itself. The shape of a palm, long fingers, slightly spread apart, not dripping, not fading, just there. As if someone had touched the wall with heat instead of moisture. And beside it, drawn carefully in what looked like the same soot or ash, were 3 words. You know now. That was it. I didn't sleep that night either. I just sat on the floor and stared at those words until the sun came up. My stomach was in knots. My thoughts kept circling back to what I had said, that I saw it, that I acknowledged it. Was that all it wanted? Was this about being witnessed? I washed the wall the next day. It didn't come off. I tried everything, soap, vinegar, scrubbed it with a rag until the paint started to peel, but that mark stayed. Not fresh, not wet, just part of the wall now. I ended up moving a piece of furniture in front of it, a low cabinet. It covers the print mostly. I still know it is there, but it makes it easier to walk past. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, nothing. No more handprints. No breathing. No voices. The mirror is still uncovered. The window is open most nights now. I even turned off the motion light outside. It never helped anyway, and I do sleep now. Lightly, but enough. I still wake up early, still check every corner of the room, but nothing new has shown up. It's like it gave up. Or maybe it got what it came for. I've thought about telling someone, a proper conversation, not just hinting or dancing around it like I had before. But I don't think anyone would really understand what it felt like, not unless they had lived through it. And it wasn't loud or violent. It wasn't like the movies. It was quiet, close. Like something curling up next to you in the dark just to see if you notice. And I did notice. That part scares me the most. Not that it was here, but that I knew. Somewhere deep down, I think I always knew it had been building. From the first smudge on the glass, I felt it, that presence, watching, waiting, creeping in from the edges. It never needed to kick down the door. It just waited until I was tired enough to open it myself. And I don't know what it was. A ghost? A trick of the mind? Some weird presence looking for a place to land? I really don't know. But I think about those 3 words a lot. You know now. Not you saw me. Not I am here. Just that. You know now. And the truth is, I do. I know there are things that sit just outside of what we call real. Things that do not show up on video, that leave no trail, that move without footsteps and whisper without mouths. I know something can press its hand into your life without ever showing its face. So I keep living here. I keep the lights off more often now. I let the dark come in, because knowing doesn't always mean understanding. And maybe that is enough. We had only been in the new house for a few weeks when the drawing showed up. It was a quiet cul-de-sac in Birmingham, the kind of place where neighbors wave from their driveways and kids ride bikes until the streetlights flicker on. Our daughter Ellie had already made a few friends, and one of them was a boy named Callum. He lived 2 doors down and had a habit of sketching houses in the neighborhood. It was his thing. Every few days he would hand someone a crayon drawing of their home, complete with stick figures and smiling suns. It was sweet, really, a little odd maybe, but harmless. One afternoon, Ellie came home with a folded piece of paper. "Callum drew our house," she said, holding it out with a grin. I unfolded it, expecting the usual childlike scrawl, and it was, mostly. The red brick facade, the white door, the 2 front windows. Even the garden gnome we had inherited from the previous owners was there, standing sentinel by the walkway. But then I noticed the attic window. It was small, tucked beneath the sloping roof, and in the drawing it was shaded dark. Inside a figure stood, not a stick figure like the rest, but a tall, thin shape with glowing eyes. 2 bright circles staring out from the blackness. I frowned. "Ellie, did Callum say anything about this?" She shrugged. "He said it's the man who sleeps up there. He watches you." A chill ran down my spine. Our attic window doesn't face the street. It's on the side of the house overlooking the backyard. From the front, it's not visible at all. For Callum to draw it, he'd have to know what it looked like. He'd have to have seen it from inside. That night, I mentioned it to my husband, Mark. "Probably just his imagination," he said, trying to sound reassuring. "Kids make stuff up all the time." "Maybe," I replied, but the unease lingered. The next day, I decided to talk to Callum's mother, Sarah. We had exchanged pleasantries before, but this was the first time I approached her with concern. "Hi, Sarah," I began. "I wanted to ask you about Callum's drawings." She smiled warmly. "Oh yes, he's always been into art. Loves drawing houses." "I noticed he drew our attic window," I said carefully. "It's not visible from the street." Her smile faltered. "Well, he has a vivid imagination. Sometimes he adds things that aren't there." "Did he ever mention being inside our house?" She shook her head. "No, I don't think so. Why?" I hesitated. "He said there's a man who sleeps in our attic, that he watches us." Sarah's expression turned serious. "I'm sorry. That does sound unsettling. I'll talk to him." I thanked her and left, feeling no more at ease than before. That evening I decided to check the attic. The entrance was a pull-down ladder in the hallway ceiling. I climbed up, flashlight in hand, and pushed open the hatch. The attic was empty, just as we had left it. A few boxes, some old furniture, and a layer of dust covering everything. No signs of anyone living there. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Over the next few days I tried to put it out of my mind, but then strange things started happening. I would find the attic hatch slightly ajar, even though I was sure I had closed it. Items in the house seemed to move on their own. A book left on the coffee table would be on the floor the next morning. The kitchen light would be on when I was certain I had turned it off. One night I woke up to the sound of footsteps above us. Mark was asleep beside me, and Ellie was in her room. I held my breath, listening. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, moving across the attic floor. I nudged Mark awake. "Do you hear that?" He listened, then shook his head, probably the house settling. "No," I insisted, "it's footsteps." He sighed and got out of bed. "I'll check." I followed him to the hallway. He pulled down the ladder and climbed up, flashlight in hand. "Nothing up here," he called down after a few minutes. "Just the usual stuff." I still felt uneasy. The next morning, I found another drawing on our doorstep. It was of our house again, but this time, the figure in the attic window was larger, more detailed. The glowing eyes were more pronounced, and the figure's hand was pressed against the glass. I showed it to Mark. "This is getting creepy," he admitted. "Maybe we should install some cameras." We set up a security system, placing cameras around the house and one in the attic. That night, we monitored the feeds from our phones. Around 2 a.m, the attic camera picked up movement. A shadow passed across the screen, then disappeared. Mark grabbed a baseball bat and headed for the attic. I followed, heart pounding. He climbed up and shone the flashlight around. "Nothing," he said, but the camera picked up something. We reviewed the footage again. The shadow was there, unmistakable. We called the police. An officer arrived and inspected the attic. He found no signs of forced entry, no evidence of anyone living there. "Could be a glitch in the camera," he suggested. But we knew what we saw. The next day, I spoke to Sarah again. "Has Callum said anything else about the man in our attic?" She looked uncomfortable. "He mentioned that the man is sad, that he watches because he's lonely." I felt a shiver run through me. "Does he say where he comes from?" She hesitated. "Callum says he was here before your family moved in." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the figure in the attic, the glowing eyes, the sense of being watched. I decided to go up there one more time. I climbed the ladder, flashlight in hand, and looked around. In the corner, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A small, childlike drawing on the wall. It was of our house, with the attic window shaded dark, and inside the figure with glowing eyes. Beneath it, in a child's handwriting, were the words, "He watches because he's lonely." I stared at it, heart pounding. Who had drawn this? When? I climbed down and closed the hatch, making sure it was secure. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. The morning after discovering the drawing in the attic, I couldn't shake the unease that had settled in my chest. The figure with glowing eyes, the child's handwriting, "He watches because he's lonely." It all felt too deliberate, too personal. I decided to take a day off work to clear my head and perhaps find some rational explanation. I spent the morning researching the history of our house. The local library had archives of property records and old newspapers. I hoped to find anything that could shed light on the strange occurrences. The librarian, a kind elderly woman named Margaret, helped me navigate the dusty files. After hours of sifting through documents, I found a newspaper article from decades ago. It detailed a tragic incident. A man named Thomas lived in our house and was found dead in the attic. The article mentioned that he was a recluse, rarely seen by neighbors, and had no known family. The cause of death was listed as natural causes, but the circumstances were odd. He had been dead for weeks before anyone noticed. I felt a chill run down my spine. Could this be the man Callum referred to? The one who sleeps up there and watches us? I photocopied the article and took it home. That evening, I showed the article to Mark. He read it silently, his brow furrowed. "This is unsettling," he admitted, "but it was a long time ago. Maybe it's just a coincidence." "Maybe," I replied, though I wasn't convinced. We decided to talk to Callum again. Perhaps he knew more than he let on. The next day, we invited him over for some lemonade and biscuits. He arrived, cheerful as ever, clutching his sketch pad. "Callum," I began gently, "can you tell us more about the man in the attic?" He looked up, his expression serious. "He's always there. He watches because he's lonely." "How do you know he's there?" Mark asked. Callum shrugged. "He told me." Mark and I exchanged glances. "He spoke to you?" Callum nodded. "In my dreams. He says he used to live here and misses it." I felt a lump form in my throat. Did he say his name? Callum thought for a moment. "Thomas." That was the name from the article. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Thank you, Callum," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That's very helpful." After Callum left, Mark and I sat in silence. "This is getting too strange," he said finally. "Maybe we should have the house blessed or something." I nodded. "It's worth a try." We contacted a local priest, Father Andrew, who agreed to come by the next day. He arrived with a calm demeanor and listened patiently as we recounted the events. "I've dealt with similar situations," he said. "Sometimes spirits linger due to unresolved matters. A blessing might help." He walked through the house, sprinkling holy water and reciting prayers. When he reached the attic, he paused. "This place feels heavy," he murmured, "as if someone is still holding on." He performed a more thorough blessing in the attic, then turned to us. "I suggest you speak to him," he said. "Let him know it's time to move on." That night, I stood in the attic, heart pounding. "Thomas," I said aloud, "I know you used to live here, but it's time to rest. You don't have to watch over us anymore." The air felt still, almost expectant. I waited, but nothing happened. Over the next few days, the strange occurrences ceased. The attic hatch remained closed, and there were no more drawings. I began to relax, thinking perhaps the blessing had worked. Then, one morning, I found a new drawing on our doorstep. It was our house again, but this time the figure in the attic was smiling. The glowing eyes were softer, and beneath the drawing were the words, "Thank you." I showed it to Mark, who smiled. "Maybe he just needed to be acknowledged," he said. I nodded, feeling a sense of peace. From that day on, there were no more disturbances. The house felt lighter, more welcoming. Callum continued to draw, but his sketches were now of gardens and sunny days. Life returned to normal, and I often thought of Thomas, hoping he had found the rest he deserved. After the blessing, things seemed to settle. The house felt lighter, and the oppressive atmosphere that had lingered since we moved in began to dissipate. Mark and I started to relax, believing that perhaps the spirit of Thomas had finally found peace. Ellie returned to her cheerful self, and even Callum's drawings took on a more vibrant tone, depicting sunny days and playful scenes. But peace, as we soon discovered, was fleeting. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Ellie approached me with a concerned expression. "Mom," she said, "Callum gave me another drawing today." I dried my hands and took the paper from her. It was our house again, but this time the figure in the attic window was different. The glowing eyes were gone, replaced by a dark, featureless silhouette. Beneath the drawing, in Callum's neat handwriting, were the words, "He's not alone." A chill ran down my spine. "Did Callum say anything else?" I asked. Ellie nodded. "He said the man has a friend now, someone who doesn't like us." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Callum's words in my mind. Who was this new presence? And why did it feel so menacing? The next morning, I decided to speak with Sarah again. She greeted me warmly, but her smile faded when I mentioned the new drawing. "Callum's been having nightmares," she admitted. "He talks in his sleep, says things about shadows and whispers. I've been meaning to talk to you about it." I shared my concerns, and we agreed to keep a closer eye on the children. Days passed, and the atmosphere in our home grew tense once more. Strange occurrences resumed. Objects moved on their own, cold spots appeared in rooms, and the unsettling feeling of being watched returned. One afternoon, while cleaning the attic, I discovered something peculiar. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard was an old dusty journal. Its pages were yellowed with age, and the handwriting was elegant and precise. As I flipped through the pages, I realized it belonged to Thomas. He wrote about his loneliness, his longing for companionship, and his belief that the house was alive, watching him. But towards the end, the entries took a darker turn. He mentioned a presence, a shadow that whispered to him, urging him to do unspeakable things. I felt a knot form in my stomach. That evening, I shared the journal with Mark. He read it silently, his brow furrowed. "This shadow," he said, "it might be what's causing all of this." We decided to consult Father Andrew again. He listened intently as we recounted the recent events and examined the journal. "This is troubling," he said. "It seems Thomas wasn't just haunted by loneliness, but by something malevolent, a dark entity that may still reside in your home." He suggested a more thorough cleansing of the house, one that would require preparation and spiritual fortitude. In the days leading up to the cleansing, the disturbances intensified. Ellie began sleepwalking, often found standing beneath the attic hatch, staring upward. Mark started experiencing vivid nightmares, waking up drenched in sweat and gasping for air. The night before the cleansing, I awoke to a faint whispering. I followed the sound to the attic, where I found the hatch slightly ajar. Summoning my courage, I climbed the ladder and peeked inside. The attic was dark, but in the corner I saw two figures. One was the familiar silhouette of Thomas, his form faint and translucent. The other was a darker, more solid shadow, its presence oppressive and cold. They turned to face me, and I felt a wave of fear wash over me. The dark figure stepped forward, and I quickly retreated, slamming the hatch shut. The next day, Father Andrew arrived with two fellow priests. They conducted a thorough cleansing, reciting prayers and sprinkling holy water in every room. The atmosphere grew tense, and at one point, a loud crash echoed from the attic. After the ritual, Father Andrew approached us. "The dark presence has been weakened," he said, "but it's not gone. It feeds on fear and negativity. You must remain vigilant and keep your home filled with light and love." We took his advice to heart. We filled our home with laughter, music, and warmth. We spent more time together as a family, creating positive memories to counteract the darkness. Over time, the disturbances lessened. Callum's drawings returned to their cheerful nature, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. But every so often, I catch a glimpse of a shadow in the corner of my eye, or hear a faint whisper in the night. I know the darkness still lingers, waiting for a moment of weakness. And so, we remain vigilant, determined to protect our home and each other from the shadows that dwell within. The days following the second cleansing were quiet, almost unnaturally so. The house felt still, as if it were holding its breath. Mark and I tried to resume our normal routines, but a lingering unease clung to us. Ellie, however, seemed unaffected, her laughter echoing through the halls as she played with her toys. One afternoon, as I was tidying up the living room, I noticed a new drawing pinned to the refrigerator. It was another of Callum's creations, depicting our house once more. But this time the attic window was empty. No figures, no glowing eyes, just a blank pane of glass. Beneath the drawing, in Callum's neat handwriting, were the words, "He left." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Perhaps the second cleansing had worked. Maybe Thomas had finally found peace. That evening I decided to bake a batch of cookies and invite Sarah and Callum over for tea. As we sat around the kitchen table, the children playing nearby, I brought up the drawing. "Callum said the man left," I mentioned, trying to sound casual. Sarah nodded. "Yes, he told me the same," said the man found a new home. "A new home?" I asked, puzzled. She hesitated. "He said the man moved into someone else's attic." I felt a chill run down my spine. Did he say whose? Sarah shook her head. "No, just that it was someone nearby." The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but I couldn't shake the unease that settled over me. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling, wondering who the new occupant of the attic might be. The following morning, I received a call from our neighbor, Mrs. Thompson. She sounded distressed. "Have you noticed anything strange lately?" she asked. I hesitated. "What do you mean?" "Odd noises, things moving on their own. My attic light keeps flickering, and I swear I hear footsteps up there at night." A knot formed in my stomach. "Have you checked the attic?" "Yes, but there's nothing there. Just old boxes and dust." I considered telling her about Thomas, but decided against it. Instead, I suggested she have her house blessed, just in case. Over the next few days, more neighbors reported similar occurrences: flickering lights, unexplained noises, and a general sense of unease. It seemed the presence had indeed moved on, but not far. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Ellie approached me with a concerned expression. "Mom, Callum gave me another drawing." I took the paper from her and unfolded it. It was our street, each house meticulously drawn. In the attic window of each house, a small, dark figure stood. Beneath the drawing were the words, "He visits everyone now." I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. The presence hadn't just moved, it was spreading. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, the lights on, listening for any unusual sounds. Around midnight, I heard a faint creaking noise coming from the attic. I held my breath, straining to hear more. The creaking continued, slow and deliberate. I woke Mark, and together we climbed the ladder to the attic. The space was empty, just as before, but the air felt heavy, charged with an unseen energy. We decided to consult Father Andrew once more. He arrived the next day, concern etched on his face. "This is unusual," he admitted. "Spirits don't typically move from house to house like this." "Is there anything we can do?" I asked. He nodded. "We can perform a neighborhood cleansing, but it will require the participation of all the residents." We spent the next few days speaking with our neighbors, explaining the situation as delicately as possible. Some were skeptical, others frightened, but eventually everyone agreed to participate. On the appointed day, Father Andrew led the cleansing, moving from house to house, reciting prayers and sprinkling holy water. The atmosphere was tense, but hopeful. After the ritual, the neighborhood felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. The strange occurrences ceased, and life slowly returned to normal. Weeks passed without incident. Ellie and Callum continued to play together, their laughter a comforting sound. The drawing stopped, and the attic remained quiet. One sunny afternoon, as I was tending to the garden, Callum approached me. "Mrs. Harper," he said, "I have something for you." He handed me a drawing, this one different from the others. It depicted our house bathed in sunlight, flowers blooming in the garden, and no figure in the attic window. Beneath the drawing were the words, "Peace." I smiled, tears welling in my eyes. "Thank you, Callum." As he ran off to play with Ellie, I looked up at the attic window. For the first time in weeks, I felt truly at ease. But deep down, I knew that peace could be fragile, and sometimes the past has a way of returning when you least expect it. The days following the neighborhood cleansing were filled with a cautious optimism. The air felt lighter, and the oppressive atmosphere that had once clung to our homes seemed to have dissipated. Children played outside without fear, and neighbors greeted each other with genuine smiles. It was as if a collective weight had been lifted from our shoulders. However, beneath the surface, a lingering unease remained. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching, waiting. The silence felt too complete, too artificial. It was the kind of quiet that precedes a storm. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Ellie approached me with a drawing in her hand. Her expression was unreadable, a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Mom," she said softly, "Callum gave me this today." I took the paper from her and unfolded it. It was our house again, meticulously drawn with crayon, but this time the attic window was different. Instead of a figure, there was a swirling mass of darkness, as if the crayon had been pressed harder, the strokes more frantic. Beneath the drawing were the words, "He's changing." A chill ran down my spine. I looked at Ellie, who was watching me intently. "Did Callum say anything else?" I asked. She nodded. "He said the man isn't the same anymore. He's angrier." That night, I found it difficult to sleep. The house was silent, but every creak and groan felt amplified. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts of the drawing and Callum's ominous words. Around midnight, I heard a faint scratching sound coming from the attic. I held my breath, straining to listen. The scratching continued, rhythmic and deliberate. I nudged Mark awake. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. He listened for a moment before nodding. "It's probably just a mouse or something." But I wasn't convinced. The sound was too deliberate, too intentional. The next morning I decided to investigate. I climbed the ladder to the attic, flashlight in hand. The space was as we had left it, dusty boxes, old furniture, and cobwebs. But in the corner, near the window, I noticed something new. There were deep scratch marks on the wooden floor, as if someone or something had been clawing at it. The marks were fresh, the wood splintered and raw. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding. I needed answers. I reached out to Father Andrew once more. He arrived later that day, his expression grave as I showed him the drawing and the scratch marks. "This is concerning," he said. "It seems the presence hasn't left. If anything, it's growing stronger." He suggested another cleansing, this time focusing solely on our house. That evening, he performed the ritual, reciting prayers and sprinkling holy water in every room. The atmosphere felt tense, the air thick with anticipation. As he concluded the ceremony, a loud bang echoed from the attic. We rushed upstairs, but the space was empty. The scratch marks, however, had multiplied, covering the floor in chaotic patterns. Father Andrew looked at me, his eyes filled with concern. "This entity is feeding on fear. We need to remain strong." In the days that followed, the disturbances escalated. Lights flickered, objects moved on their own, and the oppressive feeling returned with a vengeance. Ellie began having nightmares, waking up screaming about the man in the attic. One night, I awoke to find her standing at the foot of our bed, her eyes wide with terror. "He's here," she whispered. "He's in the house." I jumped out of bed and checked every room, but there was no sign of an intruder. Still, the feeling of being watched was undeniable. Desperate for a solution, I began researching the history of our home. I discovered that before Thomas, the house had been owned by a man named Harold, who had mysteriously disappeared. Neighbors at the time spoke of strange occurrences and a sense of dread that permeated the property. It seemed our home had a long history of darkness. Determined to protect my family, I decided to confront the entity directly. That night, I climbed into the attic alone, flashlight in hand. "Whoever you are," I said aloud, "you are not welcome here. This is our home now, and we will not live in fear." The air grew colder, and a low growl echoed through the space. I stood my ground, repeating the words until the growling ceased. As I descended the ladder, I felt a sense of resolve. I would not let this entity control our lives. The following morning, Ellie handed me another drawing. This one depicted our family standing together, holding hands with the house in the background. The attic window was empty. Beneath the drawing were the words, "He knows you're not afraid." I smiled, tears welling in my eyes. Perhaps by facing our fear, we had weakened the entity's hold. But deep down, I knew the battle wasn't over. The darkness still lingered, waiting for an opportunity to return. We really have no idea what is going on, but I'll come back here and post if anything else happens. Please pray for us.